Welcome to Integrated. This is the podcast where we seek to bridge the gap between the intellect and the will so that we can grow as disciples of Christ, surrendering all that we are and all that we have to the truth. Hey guys, I hope that you can hear us. Please let me know in the comments if you can hear us, because I've never had anything like this set up before, so I'm really excited. Late as always. That is so not true, Darren. That is definitely an Anthony thing and not me, okay? Can you guys hear me, though? Is the mic not on? No, it should be on. Let's see here. I'm going to check the audio settings. Can you not hear us? Oh, you can. You are such a jerk, Darren. I'm going to find you. I am going to find you and hunt you down. Okay. Thank you, Mac. You're awesome. You're Darren. I'm not ever having you back on the show. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Angela Erickson. If you are new to Integrated with Angela Erickson. And tonight I have a special guest with me. His name is Andrew Lang. He is the headmaster of a local Catholic high school, but he also happens to be a bourbon expert and just really fun to talk to. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Super fun fact. I didn't know this until we got to talking about this, but Andrew has his own YouTube channel. If you guys want to find him, he doesn't post. Do you post on there anymore?
I haven't been active for about a year. Yeah, I did it for about 10 years, and then I just cut back so I could focus on my career and family. But it was just a hobby. It's not Catholic, but if you have a husband who likes gear, it's called 555 Gear. And it was basically kind of men's interest channel, knives, watches, firearms, reviews, mostly comparisons. And it was a lot of fun. It went really well.
It went really, really well.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So my kids still want me to show them the channel and like have them be part of the production process.
That's super fun.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's really cool. So, okay. So tonight we're going to try, we're going to taste some bourbon. I know some of you are excited for it. Yes, Rob, yes, inebriated with Angela.
We'll get there.
Yeah, you haven't. I don't know if you've heard, but apparently that's kind of my shtick here. It's
going to be your B channel, like the one that ends up being more popular than the main one.
Yeah, exactly. This thing's not going to go anywhere, but I'll start a new channel called Inebriated with Angela Erickson, where I just rant and drink bourbon. So okay, where should we start? Okay, because first I want to talk a little bit about you. And maybe we try some bourbon, I'm thinking, and then in between, while we're sipping on that, we'll have a subject that we talk about.
I can only look at this for so long before you need to
drink. Okay, so what do you want to start with?
Okay, so
and what do I need to know as I'm learning to taste? Like, what am I looking at and for when I'm looking at my bourbon?
Sure. Well, let's line it up so the people can see. So we have a nice little selection of bourbon here. We've got Basil Hayden. We've got Knob Creek 9-year. This is we're going to finish this tonight.
Costco.
Yeah.
That thing was so cheap. I mean, it was like $45 for that huge bottle.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's terrific. Yeah, Maker's Mark. And then we have Michter's Straight Rye here. Typically with a bourbon tasting, you would go from like lightest to darkest or easiest to drink to the most challenging.
Okay.
I think in general, these are going to be pretty similar. The Michter's, have you had much Straight Rye?
I don't think that I have, no.
Okay, so we're going to have some fun seeing your reaction to this. You might hate it.
Okay.
I thought the Straight Rye might be interesting because you like old fashions, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Straight
Rye.
Rye.
A little sweeter, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, so Straight Rye is peppery and spicy.
Okay.
And so some guys like it for the mash that you would get if you're making a traditional old fashioned. That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is how do you make your old fashions?
Yeah, so normally I make my old fashions with some sugar and bitters, and then
just regular Angostura bitters.
Yeah, I mean we do have some orange bitters, but normally just regular, and then some ice, a little bit of water, mix it in there good, and then add my cherry and pour it over with the bourbon.
Okay.
And then sometimes I do put a little bit of orange in there.
Okay,
like
you garnish. Yeah. Do you ever do like the orange essence,
no, okay, I would love to.
People say that it's really good. I've had it from bars that way. I've never done it that way, but you actually heat up the orange peel and then get the essential oils out of the peel out.
Oh, that's a good idea.
If you like it sweet, it would probably really complement.
Yes.
Like a sweet orange flavor. So, okay, well, I think the one that everyone's had and is a good place to start for warming up the palate is just Maker's Mark.
Yeah.
Is that okay if I pour us a couple grams here?
Let's do it. Yeah, Max says always check the alcohol percentage first. We're drinking it neat tonight. And these, hey, I have to give a shout out to Enoch. Enoch sent me these nice little glasses. What are they called again?
These are called Glencairns. So.
Glencairns. So cheers. Thank you so much for sending these to me. That was really nice. He kind of joked about it when he interviewed me on his channel. And I didn't think he was serious. So it was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
Wait, I'll wait.
So you can go right into it. I mean,
I'm just like,
what do you say, folks? I don't think I can slow her down. I mean, we are going to finish this bottle tonight. Oh, no. So the thing that's great about Glencairns, your rapper friend NF, who sent you the glasses,
Enoch,
not MF. He would probably tell you that the way that these are designed is to stick your dang nose in there. We're both Midwesterners. We have noses that barely fit in glasses like this, but you put it in there and you don't let the alcohol burn you, but you try to just draw in as much of the nose as you can. Typically with bourbon, the nose follows right through to the palate, which means that you're going to get a really good profile of the bourbon ahead of the tasting. Now, I did bring something for you. I don't know if you want to do this, but it's funny because when people drink, they don't always remember things.
Can I just?
So here's a note card for you. I've got one.
I'm going to show you guys. We're using a tasting card.
Yes. And on one side, there's all kinds of stuff about bourbon, just walking through the tasting if you want to flip it over. But mostly it's just so that we keep track of where we're at in the tasting. I mean, the comments are for that too. If we really get lost, we'll just like, hey, guys, like, hopefully we will get there.
Okay.
But so we've got Makers here. What are you getting on the nose?
I don't know.
She says whiskey.
Peppery.
We're just ending this. Yeah, pepper. Okay, good. That's good. I'm definitely getting caramel notes.
Caramel.
Yeah. Oh. So sweet.
Yes.
Like kind of sweet caramel, like overly sugared type of caramel. You can't smell it, unless you turn up your volume all the way. Yeah. So it's pretty clean spirit though. Some of these you'll get more like pepper or spices. There's like a little bit of white pepper maybe.
Yeah,
not a lot. And then it finishes clean once you get used to breathing it in and the burning goes away. Yeah, it's
the burning.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Now that our noses are completely
acclimated.
torched. Yeah. All right. So then, just see how it goes into the palate.
Yeah.
So Maker's Mark has this great round mouthfeel. So kind of like notice how it kind of like there's not parts of your mouth that are wondering what's going on right away. Even for your first taste, there's generally a lot. Like it's very full bodied, but it's not harsh at all.
Right.
Like it's very round is also a way to characterize a way to describe smoothness. It's not smooth in the sense like, oh, I want to like finish this right now.
Right.
Maybe that's how you're feeling.
No.
I mean,
no. I mean, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's not something that I'm like, where I'm like, I don't know that I want to have more of this because it's too strong or something.
Some of these other ones that we're going to have, like the Knob Creek or the Michter's, they're much more heavily casked, which means that you're going to get more oak and structure in the palate, which typically I like it. I think it adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah.
Of course, bourbon is a corn spirit, and so compared to Scotch, especially, or blends, it's not going to have the same level of complexity. So that oak does add a level of complexity, but it also can make it more difficult. Can be kind of tannic or acidic or just like kind of harder to like savor.
Yeah.
So Makers is amazing because you can savor it and do what we're doing, but it's also an amazing mixer.
Yeah.
Like really doesn't get in the way of cocktails at all.
Right.
So for old fashions, I see why you got the big bottle.
Why I got the big bottle. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. So, okay, for me, explain how bourbon is made and what differentiates it from whiskey, just regular whiskey.
So whiskey is the genus and bourbon is a species. So whiskey is a broad category of grain-based spirits that are typically aged in some kind of cask. As I mentioned, bourbon is a corn-based whiskey. So it's typically like 5 steps to the distillation process, or to the whiskey making process that includes bourbon. I'll just keep it really short. So you start with a grain. Let me know when everyone falls asleep and I'll finish.
No. Rob is making fun of you because you said Knob Creek.
Yeah.
Which is
so Minnesotan.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. Yeah. Hey there, whoa.
Rob is from Minnesota, so you should appreciate that. You live all the way up by Ely, so.
This is definitely how I talk. Definitely is how someone in Kentucky sounds. Like, absolutely. Like,
yeah, everyone's like, are these all Kentucky? And then the traditional Thomist, he says genus and spices. Now we're getting Thomistic.
There we go. I like it.
Yeah,
I
way to go,
get
Nicholas.
More. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so you always start off with a grain that is ground, and sometimes it's germinated on like a floor. They do that typically with Scotch. With corn whiskey, not so much. And then it's malted, mashed and malted. So they mash it in water, which they make this thing called a wort, which is not drinkable at all. It's like in a big wood tun thing. And then they ferment it, and that makes what's called a beer. And it's actually the same thing as beer, except it's not drinkable like beer. Like when you're making beer,
it doesn't taste very good.
No, it doesn't taste. Yeah. I mean, maybe if you're really into whiskey,
if you've like really had a lot to drink,
you've had too
already.
much. Yeah. If you fall into one of those things where they're mashing the beer, you need to just be done.
Back away.
Yeah. But then the distinctive part that separates whiskey from beer, the Thomists will appreciate the species making difference here, and that's the distillation process. And the distillation process is interesting because alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water. And so that means that if you heat up the beer, that the alcohol will burn off.
Okay.
And a distiller is basically this big, usually copper, but there are other materials that they sometimes use, will collect the spirit that boils off. I mean, like visualizing it's like
the evaporated.
Yeah. So like imagine that this is the beer, it'll boil off and it'll be a tube that'll come off, and what they collect.
That seems very sciencey.
Yeah. Well, it's medieval. Yeah. It was invented by monks. Yeah. In the Middle
monks.
Ages. Yeah.
The monks win again.
Saving society once again.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, introduced in Scotland in I think the 10th century by Catholic monks.
Catholic monks.
Yeah, and then we brought it over, and of course, because we're Protestant, we had to use a baser grain, which is corn, compared to barley. But we Catholics can still enjoy it. We'll find a way. Everything belongs to the church.
It can be baptized.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a blessing for alcohol, isn't there, or is it just beer?
Yeah, no, I think you can. I mean, I'm
like
sure that in Scotland there's a blessing for every distillery.
Trevor Alcorn, you should be on this if you're watching from Tridentine Brewing. I'm waiting for you to pipe in here.
We need to hear the blessing. So,
yeah.
So at any rate, then after it's distilled, then it's just put into a cask, typically a white oak cask that's been charred. Sometimes they'll blend, with other whiskeys, but and then bourbon is aged for I think a minimum of 3 years. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And bourbon means that it's a pure corn spirit, mixed with a certain percentage of rye, but it has to be 50% corn. So if I was really a nerd, I would break down what they call the mash bills of each of these, which is the percentage of corn versus rye versus other grains that they put into these. I honestly have no idea.
You don't know that much.
I don't know that much. So that's how bourbon is made, to answer your question in a nutshell.
When did you get interested in all of this?
Yeah,
what
thank
first
you.
interested you?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate studies at Thomas Aquinas College. I was out there in the early 2000s, and I was I'm a cradle Catholic, was raised here in Minnesota, grew up at St. Raphael's in Crystal, and
great parish, by the way.
Yeah, good strong parish there. Father Altier was out there for a long time when I was a kid, so that was awesome.
Yeah.
And I never really drank until I was like 21, and then I was out there. Yeah, I know.
Good for you. Some of us were not that smart.
I know. Yeah, I was definitely
I love you,
boring.
Mom.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So at any rate, I turned 21 and I had friends that were like, we are not getting you trashed out here. We're going to introduce you to the art of spirits. Yeah, it was very classy. Yeah, so I totally
good friends.
They were good
My
friends.
Were
they were
not
good
like
friends.
that.
They're all monks now, by the way, which is like a great but a bummer. They're all at Clear Creek, and I have a friend who's a Carthusian and all kinds of stuff.
So you just don't get to see them very much anymore.
No, I don't, but I'm with them in spirit.
Oh, stop it!
I just broke the internet.
Oh man.
So that's really where it came from. And I actually know single malt Scotch a lot more than bourbon, but bourbon is so much fun and it's immensely popular.
So like, what makes it fun? Like, how do you?
What makes it fun?
I mean, I love it. Yeah, but I love it. But like, what for you makes it more fun than say Scotch or something else?
Well, for sure, it's more accessible. Like, there's a lot of Scotch that you kind of have to just like sit down and kind of block out everything to really like get into it, and that can be weird. I think the other thing is that it's also just widely available. So like this is kind of a nice spread because you can go to any liquor store and find this.
Yeah, stuff. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want to like have some super. I mean, I thought about getting a crazy expensive bottle of bourbon, but I really wanted this to be something that people could join us in doing.
Sure. Absolutely. So let's finish up on our Maker's Mark notes. So we do want to write down what did you capture in the aroma? Let's see if we can get you to.
Well, I mean, I thought we kind of talked about it a little bit. Yes. Like I could pick up a little bit of that pepper.
Okay. Yep.
And you noted the more of that caramel or caramel note. I almost feel like I smell a little bit of vanilla.
That's great. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's awesome. I think that falls through to the palate too. It kind of aids that what I was describing as round mouth feel of being pretty accessible and smooth. So, and let's say we have stars here because I'm just curious to see like what you like and what you don't like. Okay. So if you had to give this 5 stars being perfect, I don't want to drink anything else for the rest of my life. One being garbage. I'm not even going to finish this sip.
Obviously, it's not garbage. Yeah. I mean, I bought the big bottle, so I'm going to say a 4 star.
That sounds good. That sounds great.
Ooh, I almost colored in 5. Sorry, 5th star.
That'll be after your second shot of this, and it'll be I need to add some more stars. Yeah. And the other thing I was going to mention is the finish on this is very short, not in a unpleasant way.
It doesn't stay in your mouth forever. Yeah,
right. And so that's typical of a younger spirit. And so I think that might be something like, especially with like this Basil Hayden's here, we'll probably see something that lasts a little bit longer on the palate.
Okay.
So So anyway,
I feel like I should have a little bowl of snacks here. I made a mistake. I bet I could find some outside.
We both had dinner.
Yes, I mean I stuffed my face with some pizza beforehand. It was all good. He literally showed up at my house and I had pizza like hanging out in my mouth.
With 5 other children doing the same thing, so it was like planned, So.
Yeah, totally coordinated. I've had my life totally together today. Nothing's gone wrong.
Yeah. Perfect. Glad to hear it. That's like every Catholic mom that I talk to. Yeah.
Yeah. It was so funny. So tell us about your family and stuff too, because he came to my house, it's a complete disaster, and I said to myself, you know what? I bet he's used to this because you have 8 kids.
I do, yeah. And don't act that incredulous. The difference between 8 and 5 is not that big of a difference.
It's really not.
Yeah.
I know, and I'm only 30, so I'm bracing myself for my destiny.
Well, I think that the difference between 5 and 8 isn't as overwhelming as like going from 3 to 5 is, because you're at the point where do your oldest kids, do they watch the younger kids at all?
I mean, yeah, a little bit.
Can you leave the house at all, or?
I mean,
see, that's a real litmus test. I'm at the first point in a while where
can I leave the house? I left the house to get my hair done today for the first time in 5 years.
Okay.
And my baby cried the whole time.
Yes.
And it was so stressful. So I came home early. Like I got back from the salon, and I was looking forward to this experience. And instead I left early and my hair was still not dry and she didn't style it or anything. So to answer your question, no, I can't leave.
Right. Yeah. So that's tough. So I still call that the toddler tunnel, like where you're not really able to leave.
I remember you and I talking about the toddler tunnel. You told me about the toddler tunnel at a Relevant Radio banquet a couple of years ago. And I remember that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's true. And I think that especially for moms, it's like a blessing, but also a trial, because your whole life is defined by the interiority of the home.
Mhm.
And I mean, if we can talk about the nature of women, I would love to do that.
Please, please,
So
let's talk. I mean, when the show's integrated, so let's
right.
talk about that.
Yeah. So I mean, I was going to comment just as an observation that I think there's a distinctly feminine character to the show, and I was wondering what you did to deliberately bring that to the channel. I mean, aside from being a woman, I mean, there's
well, so I try to have somewhat of a balance, like,
Okay.
Because I want to draw in both male and female viewers. Like, I actually, in honest, I mean, this maybe won't surprise you, but I tend to get along better with men. That's just how I've always been. I've
Sure.
always, and two, I've always liked more. I'm not saying that women are stupid, so please don't.
Why are you saying women are stupid? We need to clip that down.
No, please don't. No,
it's going viral, folks.
What I noticed, and I've actually received comments from viewers and listeners that what they've appreciated about my show is something that they haven't been able to get elsewhere. Insofar as there's a little bit more of an intellectual rigor involved, and I think a lot of women are kind of craving that.
Sure.
Like, I only listen to podcasts where men are doing the podcast a lot of the time. And when I started this podcast, I thought, I'm a woman, but I need more to chew on than just like constantly griping about the domestic life, you know?
Right.
There are other things that I'm interested in. And so that's what I want to bring to the table. But I know that there are other women like that, but I also want men to be involved too, because I get along with men better. And I find that our interests tend to intersect more than I think we realize, because we tend to stay in our own separate camps.
Lanes, yeah, right. Definitely. Well, and I think that with regard to the topics that you're passionate about, you know, the pro-life movement, the liturgy, ecclesiology, these are things that men and women are equal, you know, inheritors
it just looks different.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that's really important to sort of emphasize that. And even for men and women to be able to appreciate more of that perspective. I think in the liturgy wars and things like that, it is a very masculine discussion right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have more of a feminine voice that can come in and say, here's what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is probably a little bit different than what some of the men, a lot of you guys get really caught up in legality, kind of like more legalistic type stuff, the details. And for me, and that stuff is really important to me too. But I also look at how can we express exteriorly our inner disposition? And so what does that beauty look like? How do we bring those two together? And I think that's definitely more of a feminine thing, because it involves nurturing and drawing out. And I think women tend to do that better than men. No offense.
Obviously. We're all so nurturing, us boys.
I know.
Like that's like what women are looking for, is like, oh, I need a man who's gonna mollycoddle my kids. Like, no, that's the complementarity of things, right? And what you're saying really resonates with something I was reading recently by Saint Edith Stein.
She's lovely.
Yeah, so I brought, just to show how much of a nerd I am, I brought books that I'm going to be discussing.
He brought books.
But one of the things I thought we would talk about, because we're talking about integration, right? Mm-hmm. And like Edith Stein's treatise on woman is for sure a worthwhile read.
Is it up there with like Alice von Hildebrand's The Privilege of Being a Woman?
Oh, it's better for sure.
Way.
Yeah. I mean, I love Alice von Hildebrand. She's like super.
She's incredible.
Like, she's a super
thought about
person.
naming my next child after her.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I have friends, like, I don't know if Danny Grimm's listening, but like his godmother was Alice von Hildebrand, and like she's an amazing writer, and that book is a classic. But I mean, as far as dealing with the actual nature of woman, like Edith Stein's the best modern writer on that, I think, out there.
Really?
Period. Like,
well, now I need to read. You know what? My oldest is born on her feast day.
Oh wow! Well,
so I've always felt like a connection to her.
Right.
But I haven't dove in on that.
So she has a great essay in here on that, what she calls the ethos of women's professions, and the thing that she talks about is the qualities of women. She says women naturally seek to embrace what is living, personal, and whole. And I thought that was like so connected with your idea of integration. So living, first of all, like talk about the liturgy, right? Like the reason why the liturgy matters is because it is alive.
Yes.
It's the body of Christ's participation with the head, right? And so therefore how we do the liturgy matters, right?
Absolutely.
Not just because of external forms, but I mean, external forms matter because they're expressive of an inner reality, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
That's why like modesty is so important, but it's not, it can't be
problem for us men.
And it can't be forgotten about in terms of chastity. Like all of these things interplay. And I think so often we don't have a good grasp on what any of that looks like and what it means practically.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's where like this idea of women having a quality of being personal. Edith Stein in this essay actually equates it to the making of Eve in the Old Testament. Of course, she's she is the Hebrew word is really weird. I'm not going to remember, but of course it means helpmate, right?
Yeah.
And so like, what does it mean to be a helpmate if you don't mean it in just terms that are slavish, right? Because that's like how like modern feminists would look at helpmate, and they just think, oh, she's inferior. Well, no, actually, it's
servitude.
Right, servitude. And what she argues is that, well, she's the means that life is going to be perpetuated through the human race, and that's true. And so it's effectively made a spiritual reality in a much more profound way by our Blessed Mother. But the idea that women bring out not just like their personal, like, oh, I'm listening to you and I'm listening to what you're saying, and I know about this person, and kind of like the gossipy woman thing that is like lame. Personal actually means seeing what is unique about the individual with respect to their dignity, right? So and bringing that out, and men are not always good about that.
No,
men can be vulgar, that's
sadly more women can be that way too, because we've sort of embraced this really distorted understanding of masculinity because of feminism. Feminism is really, I mean, when you reject the very nature of woman and what makes her who she is, that woman, that essence, of course you're sterilizing it and making it masculine, because that's something too. And what I found too is that men are more feminine today and women are more masculine, because we're complementary, there's a complementary aspect there. So of course, when one changes, the other follows.
You can distort the balance, right? Exactly.
It is. And it's a weird time. I mean, there's so much disintegration. People are so dissociated from who they are.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I think that we're in a society where we're easily 3 generations in of men being given a false idea of masculinity that's an impossible standard. Machismo is sort of the pop culture standard of men, like I need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger chewing on a cigar, or I'm not a man type of thing.
Or the opposite of like, I'm a man, but I'm a feminist.
Oh yeah,
it's like both. It's either or.
Right. There's no kind of identity that isn't in an extreme, right? Do you have some good comments? I see people rolling in.
So Enoch, we thanked you. You weren't on at the beginning of the show, but thank you. By the way, I think a lot of people are commenting about this stuff, but they're just talking in there.
That's great. Well, guys, thanks very much for tuning in. I appreciate everyone rolling into the comments. It's busy over there. Let's move on to our second one, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deal. What do you recommend?
Well, so I think that it might be interesting to do the Knob Creek next.
The Knob Creek.
Yeah. Not Creek. Not Creek. Let's be clear. It's Creek, right?
Yep.
So this is an interesting one, I think, by comparison, excuse me. This will be a bit more challenging, but I hope that it's also rewarding. So Knob Creek is a Jim Beam small batch bourbon. So Jim Beam, I think the largest bourbon producer out of Kentucky, and they have a small batch collection that actually the Basil Hayden is also part of. And this is 9 years old. So it's quite a bit older than the Maker's Mark. I think Maker's Mark is 4 or 5. I could be wrong. And it's kind of one of the first bourbons that really brought craft bourbon onto the scene in the mid 2000s. So it's a little more challenging, but I think it's really good. So hopefully we'll like it. So right away on the nose.
Test.
Yeah. So
it's definitely smells vanilla.
I'm definitely getting brown sugar. You get that brown sugar. I'd say brown sugar, cinnamon, definitely spicier.
You are smelling so much more. My sniffer must be dead.
So get that nose in there. Woo, yeah, like that, right? Yeah. See, there we go. Yeah, that's what you want to do at first. You almost want to be woo. So get it in there. I'm getting vanilla notes too.
Vanilla.
Yep. But I'm getting a lot of brown sugar.
I smell mostly the vanilla. And do you find that people, because our bodies are so different, just the way we're made is so different, that people sort of pick up on different things more strongly than others?
Right. I think it definitely has to do with physiology. It also just has to do with art, that there's an art of tasting.
which I have not.
Well,
I mean, I've perfected the taste.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah, no. So you probably are able to enjoy it, but the actual like process of being metacognitive about the identifying the flavors, that's usually something that takes more work. So I
did you like go through a formal process?
I was my first job after TAC set me up for professional success later in life. I was an assistant manager at a wine store. So I ran tastings, mostly of wine, but also of other things. And that really challenged me to explore my palate a little bit. That's another way talking about integration that you can grow as a person is by the holistic activity of your senses, right? So everyone talks about like growing in aesthetic appreciation, looking at art, listening to good music.
So lovely about being Catholic,
yes,
is that physical component. Like God came to us to be touched, so we could taste Him, feel Him, experience every.
Yeah, the letter of St. John, that idea that Christ is actually made manifest by the physical encounter that St. John had with Him,
right?
And I mean, what's interesting is that's true of all of creation, actually. Like creation itself, as St. Paul says, discloses the glory of God, right? And so there's a way in which proper enjoyment of things is actually sort of proto-evangelical, I would say, that by enjoying things properly in the way that they're meant to be enjoyed, you actually are disposing yourself to the creator of those good things.
That's lovely.
The Lord's the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's Proverbs, but so anyway, so here's to Knob Creek.
Yeah.
So you'll notice it's a lot less sugary on the palate.
Yeah, it is.
Did you
it's
notice
definitely more. It tastes more acidic.
Yeah, and it finishes a lot spicier.
Yes.
That's that oak cast that I was telling you about. This is a lot older. I think the thing that I would be trying to pay attention for is give it another nose and see if it
tastes as round to me.
Definitely not. Yeah. Definitely not. Yeah, definitely kind of like almost thinner or something.
Yeah.
Like it's not waterier. That's not what it is.
But it's still there. Like I can still taste it on my palate.
Right. But it's like almost have to like so bourbon guys.
Like thinner. Yeah. It's so weird that that's how you can describe the way that things
flavor
taste, and you're like feeling it and trying to conceptualize it, and as if it has mass in that way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And so like the Knob Creek will sit on your tongue in a different way. It kind of moves to the side, and like of course that's connected with just the actual way that your taste buds are designed, that they're not all in the same, the receptors aren't all in the same place on your tongue, and so what will pick up the flavor is the receptor that's proper to the flavor,
right?
And so that's especially if you're not used to drinking spirits and drinking slowly, it's very weird at first because we're all used to just tasting stuff right away. That's mass produced food basically in a nutshell, is make it as consumable as possible.
Culture,
yeah, exactly. That's why you scarf pizza.
I would
never do that.
I would never.
God forbid. So let's try this again. I think.
Enoch is wondering what year you went to TAC.
Yeah, thanks. I graduated in 2006, so I was there from 2002 to 2006.
Oh, hey, it's good to see you, John. Thanks
Hi, John.
for joining us.
John, parent of Holy Spirit Academy. It's just Dr. Pepper. Yeah,
it's just thanks, Jake Tate. So I don't know if you know who Jake Tate is, but he is one of the guys over at Mass of the Ages.
Okay,
he's a good friend of mine.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Well, John is an excellent. John Northern School is a great car mechanic, and he works on my '72 Pontiac. He put on new brakes this summer.
Boy, for me, so I need to have Lars maybe go see him, because we've been working on our old Sable for the last 2 months, and we don't have it figured out. Yeah, we got new stuff here at the house today. Thanks, Amazon. But,
yeah. So, well, that's great. So,
Jake, of course. Stop it. You're the best. Oh, so Enoch is wondering if you know Joseph Cunningham or Daniel Morgan.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, Joseph and I were friends back in the day. He's a great guy.
That's awesome.
Yep. I think we're basically Facebook friends at this point. I haven't seen him in years, but we were good friends back in the day. Like go to the beach and kill bottles at the beach type of thing. So it was good. Fun. Yeah, he's a good man. He's got a big family now too, I think.
Does he? That's so great. Okay.
So how would you describe? So when, like I said, I thought
Mhm.
this would be more challenging,
Yeah.
right? Try to get some flavor. Try to get some notes. Like what notes are you catching?
When you say notes, what do
Like
you mean?
like a
It
word to
this
describe the taste, not the feel, the
so
taste.
yeah, I mean, it just I mean, it's more acidic. That's the thing that it doesn't feel like it like we kind of talked about with the makers. It's definitely more
Yes.
round. It doesn't feel as to me complex. Like there just isn't as much flavor to me.
Okay. Okay.
To be
Sure.
honest,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
maybe is like bad to say because this has been aged longer. It just feels like maybe a little bit spicier, more I don't know,
Pepper. Yeah.
peppery,
Sure. Yep.
but
Yep.
not. And I can smell the vanilla. I'm not tasting it as much.
Yeah. The vanilla doesn't come
It's not
through.
as sweet. Like the makers is more sweet.
Definitely. Yeah. So
This is not as sweet to me.
so I feel like there's almost like notes of like jerky or like kind of like fibrous flavors, and I think again that's the cask presenting
Yeah.
itself.
So why do they use casks? And like, I mean, did it initially start like, here, we're going to store this here, and then it just was like, hey, this is like really good stored in this particular.
Yeah, there's all kinds of legends about where cask use came from.
Okay.
In Scotland, most of the casks that are used are either ex-bourbon casks or ex-wine casks, so from
Okay.
Spain. Bourbon typically uses virgin white oak casks that's charred, so that's actually another component.
Why does it have to be charred?
I think containment, because you don't want it to just taste like wood.
Right.
Yeah, so it seals in the flavors of the white oak.
Okay.
But it also, I think, arguably, so this is one of the things that's interesting is you probably know this, but one of the less known flavors is savoriness.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Yeah.
so it adds a savor actually. The Japanese have this funny word called umami.
Yeah, I was gonna say
right?
umami.
Yeah, so it's not exactly the same as umami because it's not
Yeah.
like buttery,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's another way that you could describe the Knob Creek is buttery.
Like mushrooms are usually kind of good for
Yes.
umami,
Right.
or different types of like coconut aminos or
Mhm,
things like that
mhm,
in
mhm.
cooking. Yeah.
Right. And so like I think that like this, for example, like I would want the Maker's Mark with something like buttered crackers or like pastries.
Yeah, like what kind of foods would you pair with these? Because
Right.
that makes a big difference. Like I
Right.
notice when I'm drinking certain wines, if I'm eating something spicy, then certain wines, like
Right.
it really brings out the flavor.
Exactly.
But you could have something sweet with the same wine and it's like so disgusting.
Right. Yeah,
to
it
have
doesn't
that paired
fit
together.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
I think that like this Knob Creek would go great with like prime rib, something kind of
That's actually like my favorite food. So maybe I would love it.
Yeah,
if
right.
It was with the prime rib.
Right, right, exactly. Well, and like typically food that has a little bit more structure can take a stronger drink too.
That makes sense.
So yeah. So the thing that I want you to try to notice too is see if this feels a little longer, even if you don't necessarily like. Yeah.
Yes.
So
for
like
sure.
that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That
it
even
lingers.
it's not like lingering like the way that dark chocolate will linger or something, where it's the flavor of the chocolate. Like it's
like the feeling.
Yes,
almost.
It's a feeling. That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's actually your taste buds working to still process the flavor.
Oh, interesting.
So it's not just the spirit, it's also that there's something in the spirit that your brain's trying to wrap its head around.
This is so cool. I'm loving this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, oh yeah,
this is really great. Yeah, Mac. I mean, you guys all know I love pineapple on my pizza. I'm team pineapple on my pizza.
I am too.
With jalapenos especially. I love that balance.
Nice. See, like, wouldn't this be good with like jalapeno poppers?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
But like,
See?
let's be honest. Jalapeno poppers are just always good.
Yeah, right. Yeah. My wife Alyssa grew some awesome jalapenos this summer, and they're like
are they really
crushingly spicy.
Really?
Like, yeah,
That's
so
a
good.
Talent. That's like a gift.
I love it. Yeah, I don't know what she does, but
and we haven't shared this. Alyssa and we were part of like a homeschooling co-op for a while. So she was coming to my house to do homeschooling stuff for I don't know, 3 months before I was like, sorry guys, I'm about to have a baby. I can't do this anymore. Can't have kids destroying my house every other week. But yeah, and I have to say, I love Alyssa.
Oh, thanks.
She is lovely.
I like her too. She's okay.
She's okay. She's so great. Oh, and you guys are just like a perfect pairing.
Yeah, she's been awesome. I mean,
sorry.
Oh yeah, no. So anyway,
was that a good? That was a good pun, right? Perfect pairing.
Perfect
We're
pairing.
talking about perfect pairings. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where's Jeff, the Supreme Pontiff, when I need him?
Oh my gosh. So yeah, no, she's amazing. She obviously right now is holding on the fort for me. So if you're happening to tune in, Alyssa, that means the kids are in bed. Congratulations.
Yay.
If not, sorry. It's really hard over here. Okay, I hope you understand the sacrifices that I'm making on my end. It's just,
I know.
We're equally yoked.
This is tough.
Yeah.
I know. I'm gonna suffer through the rest of this.
We'll do what you can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, so I really didn't get into tasting properly until I was this assistant manager at a wine shop after college. And then after that, I just wanted to keep it up. There's a lot of I think the collapse of the West can be attributed to a collapse of an appreciation of beauty.
Absolutely. Well, we don't even know what's beautiful anymore.
Right.
I mean, you look at everything and it's so ugly. Like I don't, for example, in St. Michael, we have this beautiful church that St. Michael built, which actually, to be honest, kind of bummed me out because the historic church is exceedingly beautiful as well.
A fine work of architecture.
More of that Gothic architecture is beautiful.
Right.
And then they built this other church, which is still very beautiful, but it's more of like that Eastern look, right? So it has the big dome and it's very big and spacious kind of. But then next to it, you have all these new Protestant churches that are popping up. And they're just like
literally around
warehouses.
the church.
They're just like warehouses with a cross on it. And it's like, is this an event center or is this a church where you like...
It'll eventually be a post office when that denomination collapses,
kind of. I mean, it's weird to look at because you have this beautiful, huge Catholic church. And then around it, you have these two very ugly Protestant churches. And it's like if I were just somebody looking for a new church and I didn't have a particular bent one way or another, of course I would go to the beautiful Catholic church.
Right.
Why are we drawing people into beauty? What is it? Why do you think, okay, my brain is running 1,000 directions.
I'm hearing you. Yeah, let's go.
But I'm listening right now on audiobook to Dr. Mary Eberstadt's book on how the West lost God. Have you?
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good book.
Great.
She's kind of slowly getting her way into how feminism ruined the world. It's just my opinion, I guess, but I'm still waiting for it. But she talks about the family factor, and the family factor is what changed and has determined so strongly whether or not people have faith, basically.
Sure.
The family factor, usually having an intact family, and especially having a strong father, obviously. So for you, when you look at where our culture is right now, and you say that you think the loss of an appreciation for beauty, how do you think that corresponds with the sexual revolution and things? Because for me personally, I think the sexual revolution has just destroyed everything. Yeah,
well, that most definitely. Yeah, I think that here's kind of a high level way of answering your question. If you look at Aquinas's definition of beauty, he defines it both subjectively in terms of what we experience, but also in terms of qualities that beauty has. And one of the qualities of beauty that I thought you would think is particularly interesting is integrity, right?
Yeah.
And integrity he defines as completeness of parts. So like an integral thing has the fullness of everything that it's supposed to have.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so like the family is an excellent example where integrity matters. Not, I have this, I don't collect a lot of like war paraphernalia. I teach history at Holy Spirit Academy, but I do have some like war propaganda stuff that I think is great. And I have the sign over by my gun safe at home that says, if men were as loyal to their country as they were to their women, then goodbye country.
Kind of true.
It's like, right. So
true.
This is like World War II propaganda. And so like the idea is that starting with the man, of course, is the head of the household. It's important that the integrity of the family is protected. Yes.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Because I was on another podcast. I'll be releasing it soon on my own podcast. It won't be on YouTube, so you'll have to find it on a podcasting platform.
Right.
But I was talking about this with another woman. Her name is Helen Roy, and she runs Girl Boss Interrupted, and she's an editor over at The American Mind. And I mean, I know I'm not the only person that has noticed this, but like Eve was the first feminist. Really, she's the first one to say to God, like, no, I want this extra knowledge. I want what I want. And Adam was the first beta male who was like, yep, okay. And then he like passes the blame on her afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that exactly what men do today too? I mean, I think I see it so much in abortion.
And think about this.
I see it so much in abortion. Like the men saying, whatever you want.
Right.
Whatever you want. If you want to have the abortion, if you want to kill our child, go ahead. I'll support you in whatever you choose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the most beta, disgusting thing. And most of the time, women are just waiting for the guy to say, what are you talking about? Of course I'm going to help you.
Right.
Of course we're going to.
That's my child. That's my son or daughter.
That's our child. Like this is, we're in this together. But we just have this weird, it's like men absconding, fathers who have totally absconded from their role in the family. And of course women follow, but also the same can be said, like women abscond and so do men.
Well, what Satan tempts Eve with is an idea.
Yeah,
right. So it's in a way like the idea of feminism as a false ideology.
Yeah.
I think you can make a case that Eve was tempted not with a reality, but with an idea that was a falsehood, right? Yep. And so there's a way in which like that's the era fundamental to the ideology of all kinds, is that you think that the idea is more real than the reality.
Well, what I find really interesting too, especially when you look at the story in Genesis of Adam and Eve, is that when you talk in the Old Testament about knowledge, like a man knowing a woman,
mm-hmm.
That's euphemistic language.
Mm-hmm.
But so too, with Eve wanting to know and have it's like the only way you can know is to experience it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's really how sin came into the world is experience. I think when I read that, it's like there was no experience of sin in the world, and she wanted to know what that was like.
Right. Absolutely.
That's why it's so egregious, because
and Adam too, like he's willing, he doesn't just, he isn't just like okay with her having the apple, like he takes the apple.
Yes, he takes the apple too. Right. And so he's an observer and then he's a partaker.
Right. Exactly.
But he lets her take the fall first.
Right.
Kind of like you're watching someone to see how far they fall. Like, is it okay? Is it okay? Will they be okay? Okay, then I'll try.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that it's goofy to like. We all have the like kids' books version of the garden or something.
Yeah.
And Adam's always like, I was just looking at the avocados over here.
Yeah, like
I had no idea.
The way. No, he wasn't.
Yeah, like no, they were together.
Watching.
Like that's like the way that Adam praises Eve when she's made, and knowing that he hadn't fallen meant that he was by her side.
Right.
And so there's no like distance of indirect agency or something that you can say like, oh, Adam had no idea what was going on, or something like that. Like, no, he was like probably observant to the temptation that the serpent gave, and if he wasn't directly there, then Eve told him about it right away, because that's what people who aren't in sin do.
Right.
Is they're just forthright about
but
stuff.
Too, and like you just see how they both have so neglected their duties, right? Like he was supposed to be a protector,
right,
and she was supposed to be subservient,
right,
and not in a indentured servitude type of way, but insofar as she was supposed to be looking to him to lead.
Exactly, of course. And this connects with another quality of beauty out of the three qualities of beauty. We talked about integrity, which is of course connected with integrated, but the idea of proportion is an idea that's connected. So integrity has to do with intrinsic fullness, but proportion has to do with due order, so things that relate to one another but are different. This is very important for men and women, because one of the main beauties of the household is actually the complementarity of men and women, which is a difference, right? It's not the same. It shouldn't be the same. And so therefore, in a collapse of individual integrity, then you also lose the proportion of what men and women are supposed to be doing, right? And then the third quality, which I think is very interesting, is there's kind of not a very good word for it in English, but it's like radiance or illumination. And so the idea that beautiful things are just beautiful, that you're drawn to the brightness of things when they're whole.
That's so interesting, because I've just been thinking so much about God being the light of the world. Obviously, I mean, the readings in the, I don't know if you go to the Novus Ordo. That was the readings yesterday. You know what I mean? But like, but
still the Gospel of John,
But yeah, I mean, so much of what we read is all, God being the light of the world, and being intrinsically drawn to that, almost magnetism. right? Like
Sure,
you just
absolutely.
can't help, you're just drawn to it. It's innate.
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that it's again, it's a feature of someone who is fully themselves and with people that recognize and compliment who they are, that they're going to be able to do things that are beautiful. So like that idea of shining, that's what happens in heaven, by the way, is there's the glory of all the blessed who complement each other perfectly. And in order, like there's a difference
Are
of
you
higher
saying
and
there's
lower
a
orders.
hierarchy
There is,
in
believe it or not.
heaven?
Yeah, just as there
How
is on
dare
earth.
you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Just kidding.
yeah, and it's a meritocracy too, unfortunately.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know, it's even
I
worse.
am in
Yeah,
big trouble.
yes. So anyway, so how that connects with spirits, though only seemingly indirectly at this point, is that all of human life is ordered to leisure, ultimately festivity. This is something that Joseph Pieper talks about. That I'm a big Joseph Pieper fan, Thomist of the 20th century, and the idea of festivity is that there are things that are worthwhile in themselves, and that by setting time aside to celebrate the goodness of the things that are worthwhile for their own sake, the fact that we exist, all the way to the beauty of the Roman Rite, pick the thing that you want to contemplate. There are some things that you don't have to go further. There's no further usefulness to that thing.
Right.
Well, all things of beauty have an aspect of contemplation built into them, and spirits are that way. The thing that's kind of nice is we don't do this for nutrition. I mean, maybe the monks did with beer in the Middle Ages. Yeah, maybe you need to, you need to get some more food in your diet other than pizza and spirits. Let's expand the diet a little bit.
Yeah, I know. It's like Wheaties. This is the diet of champions.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is not, definitely, if this is your breakfast, folks, like we probably need to have a different, we're going to talk about alcoholism. But
Rob goes, I'll eat any taco.
Oh,
Seriously?
good man.
Are we
good
talking
man.
about tacos right now?
Yeah, next time we'll have tacos and whiskey.
Taco Tuesday.
Yeah. There will be no podcast. We'll just be eating and drinking, and people can tune in. That sounds great. Yeah. So that's what I love about spirits, is that it's a drink that's intrinsically contemplative. Because there's no, I mean, of course you can abuse it and then you're drinking for drunkenness, but that's not what it's made for. Actually, it's meant for what we're doing, which is tasting and talking.
Okay, so like, how do you then? Because, and I actually I had a great interview with Trevor Alcorn from Tridentine Brewing. However he wants to pronounce it, which is wrong, but I love you. He says Tridentine Brewing, but. We talked about this kind of like St. Thomas, how he talks about drinking, whether or not it's acceptable. Right. And there are so many people, and I think there's a trend for people not to drink right now.
Right,
I think because it has been so abused.
Right.
And I have alcoholism in my family on both sides.
Me too.
And so what do you like, how do you recommend people go about drinking, and why would you argue that it is acceptable?
Right. Well, I think
apart from like Jesus turning water into wine.
So
like
there's
some of the obvious
theological arguments that are pretty strong. The wedding feast at Cana,
that's a little strong there.
I mean, the argument, of course, from reason is the virtue of temperance is one of the cardinal virtues. And so there's an excellence proper to the soul of being able to moderately enjoy things, because a healthy, wholesome enjoyment of things is a way of being alive. Right. Think about anything that you enjoy properly, whether it's a beautiful sunset or, relaxing.
Yeah, you can't just relax all the time.
Though, right. Exactly. You turn to a noodle, right?
Right.
So there's like a way in which that if you're not healthy and strong and are doing things, then relaxing doesn't have meaning.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's the same with all things that we need to be temperate about, food or drink.
Yeah.
Human sexuality. These are all things that in the mean, that's actually the proper way to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's the way that those things are made, is that in a balance, you're going to actually enjoy it the most. And so I think the argument is not only that, well, these things are good, and our Lord manifestly revealed that they were good in his ministry, and that's a powerful thing in of itself. But even according to reason, we can see how if one were able to enjoy it properly, and some people aren't. I think that's what alcoholism is when you get to the end of the day. Is it,
for sure.
There's just some people who have personal issues that make it very difficult to enjoy things.
But it can be
Yeah.
I mean, like food too. I mean,
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
not just
I mean, we have an
alcohol.
obesity. I mean, that's what one of the things that COVID demonstrated, right? I mean,
Oh,
was like,
absolutely.
oh, the people that are really victims here are the obese, right? And everyone else that was lied to.
A
But
lot of
yeah,
us, yeah,
right.
everybody
Yeah.
was lied to. I know personally multiple people who doctors
Yeah.
who have had adverse health events
Right.
because of the COVID shot.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
Multiple
Yeah.
clots, heart attacks, everything.
Well, and if it was designed in a lab, then it stands to reason that we're going to have adverse health effects because of the actual.
Well, exactly. It was
you
a
know,
bioweapon.
Right, exactly. So, okay, we've gotten to the spicy part of the podcast, folks. We're in agreement,
Here
though,
we
so that's nice.
go.
Yeah, buckle
Yeah.
up, folks. Yeah, I actually think that's true, by the way. And so,
Yeah.
so that's the thing that's so interesting about take something like winding it back a little bit, talk about alcohol. Like there's a kind of people on the fringes that probably aren't in a good place to be able to enjoy this.
And it's
Right.
wise for them not to,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Like it doesn't make sense for them to try and exercise temperance
Right.
or discipline in an area in which like the temperance is them not
Right,
drinking it.
right. I mean, I've
Because that's an
met
exercise of
morbidly
virtue.
obese people who cannot be around sweets.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to hurt themselves if they're around it. They can't eat a single
And so
donut.
it is prudent for them. Because
Right.
so there's this there's also prudence involved in discipline,
Right,
which
right.
obviously both
Right.
of those go
Yeah,
right into
prudence is the governing cardinal virtue,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that it's true that the exception actually proves the rule, though, that these things are made
Right.
for man's enjoyment. And
Yeah.
it's in a way, like I would even argue that just as we have an obligation to pursue higher things in the intellectual life and the spiritual life, even in matters material, we have an obligation to cultivate good taste. One of the things we talked about maybe coming up in this podcast is just remembering Pope Benedict XVI.
Yeah, I
right?
would love to talk about that.
Yeah, well, and so there's an example of a man who was a champion of culture par excellence, right? Who loved Mozart, who enjoyed and spoke about sacred art frequently in his writing and in his addresses. And his brother, of course, was the choir master at Regensburg for a long time. And so
yeah, I feel like we don't think about art very much.
Right, exactly.
Maybe because there is so little of it, kind of
Right.
what we talked about before. Like
Mhm.
everything is very ugly and
Right.
blasé. But like, do you think that part of the reason we just don't think about it or cultivate it is because it's just simply there aren't enough people making beautiful art? I mean, like that Martin Luther King Jr. statue. Are you kidding me? that thing that they just put out for MLK Day. Are you kidding me? Is that art?
Yeah, right.
Is that
Well,
beautiful?
so
I'm sorry, whoever made it, but it's not.
hilarious.
It's really ugly.
It's hilariously bad.
Yeah,
so
it's so bad.
you're gonna put that on.
Yeah.
When you do the post, you're gonna
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's so ugly.
It's really funny.
It's not art.
It's so bad. So I love Roger Scruton, and he has this great documentary called Why Beauty Matters. And I teach a class at Holy Spirit Academy, which is the high school that I'm the headmaster of. And one of the classes I teach is a senior elective called Art Permaculture. And the class basically explores the connection of art and culture, but also how culture and art are basically the prima forma for all of the things that Christ reveals. That Christ works through beauty and art.
Yeah, absolutely.
And utilize culture at a pivotal point in the history of the world to fully reveal himself. And that the church understood this.
Yeah.
And so that if you look at the early development of the church, it was a protector of culture, right?
Yeah.
Roger has brought attention to this with the Benedict option, this type of thing, that we need to be protectors of authentic culture. And so, again, like to talk about Pope Benedict,
Yeah,
like this is a man
Benedict,
who
he really sought to do exactly
right
that.
to bring culture to revive what's possible of the West, which we singularly are the bastion of culture in the world and have been. I mean, that's Christendom, right? It's not something new. It's something that since the full revelation of Jesus Christ, we are responsible for helping humanity see itself for what it could be. And so a revival of culture, this is something that, Roger Scruton talks about. He talks about how architecture is a great litmus test, right? Of how enculturated we are or are not. And he talks about, he goes to different neighborhoods in England and points out ugly buildings and what used to be there. And he'll do things like find little bars that are, little pubs that are still open, and how everyone's attracted to those things.
Yeah.
And it's because, of course, with culture is humanity, right? So there's something fundamentally inhuman about postmodern and modern culture, and especially architecture reveals this. If you look at like brutalist architecture, it's like unlivable. You can't enjoy the spaces that architects create, and it's very cynical. You look at a lot of architects; they're aware of the fact that they're creating something inhuman.
Do you know what just occurred to me?
Yeah,
is I wonder if perhaps some of the one of the biggest reasons why so much of our architecture is so bland and boring, just straight up ugly, is because we're so inoculated. Like, we're so busy. There's so much going on internally with the internet and being constantly connected, which is kind of what we're doing
Sorry,
here.
folks.
But I mean, it's like you're constantly inundated with information. Your brain has to process it. And so there's nothing left for your brain to process. So we're trying to create these environments where we don't have to process much.
Right.
Whereas in the past, we weren't constantly connected to everyone. You could appreciate so much more out in nature. And that's why our buildings were beautiful.
Right.
Because you could actually take it in. Your brain wasn't overwhelmed looking at it. It wasn't, it just wasn't so busy.
Right. Well, I think that it's true that all of modernity and postmodernity, by extension, is basically an attempt to remove people from reality. And so, like, if you read Pius X, the way he condemns the modernists is largely a whole bunch of errors that remove people from the living church in various ways. Denying the divinity of Christ, denying the immutability of God. God can change, etc. The kind of stuff that you hear modernists always talking about. And so, like,
because God wasn't a wrathful God in the New Testament,
I know. Yes,
right?
Yes. The
exactly.
nasty Old Testament God, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Good thing that we replaced him with Jesus, who we can define however we want.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And so, architecture is meant to be a reflection of culture. Architecture literally is the space that people build when they want to live somewhere. And insofar that you've now removed that essential component from architecture, even, and I mean, I have to admit, our skyline in Minneapolis is better than most. There's still a sort of resignation to a reality that isn't an economy in the traditional sense. Economy, the Greek word, literally means the management of the household. So,
I didn't realize that.
Right. Yeah. So economics fundamentally used to be about local culture, right? Building off of the cell society of the family, and then civil society emerges right out of that. Right. And that's the reason for Catholic education, by the way.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. Let's try our next bourbon, and then we'll talk about why everyone should homeschool.
But send your kids to a Catholic high school. It's not it's one and then the next. Yes. So just to be clear, I'm going to persuade you about this. High schooling
I'm open to it.
Yes,
actually,
I have an argument that you should probably send your kids to a Catholic high school if there's a good one that's available.
Hear. I'm totally open to that. Let me finish this.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't want to waste this. So
is it any better? She's like,
I can feel it in my nose.
Okay, well that's good. So if you thought that one was challenging, this one might be even more twisty because this is a rye. So this is not based off of a corn spirit. This one, rye compared to corn, it is much spicier. Typically used in balance in the most bourbons have some amount of rye in it to actually tone down how sugary and kind of how like it can get kind of syrupy if you just have corn spirits. But Michter's is a very nice distillery also in Kentucky. I think they do all their own distilling. This is something else that if I was geeking out about bourbon, there's a lot of rebranding in bourbon that isn't authentic at all. You can pay a distillery to make your spirit for you and then just repackage it and sell it. There's a big scandal around that. But like Michter's, I think, is one of the good guys who's, the big ones like, Maker's Mark and Knob Creek, which is Jim Beam, like they're definitely making their own stuff. But like this is a smaller distillery that's definitely making their own stuff. So anyway, this one I think you should enjoy as well. Imagine this one as an old fashioned. I see. I'm getting like leather notes.
Yes, maybe
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I'm smelling because
Mhm.
it's different. It's not something I've smelled yet. Still smell the vanilla. It's just like a really strong scent for me. Something a little soft and sweeter.
Almost like
Something
like
yeah.
sugar
I was
cookies
gonna
or
say
something.
sugary.
Yeah, okay, yeah. This one doesn't seem as harsh on the nose to me.
No, it's not like burning all the way through my throat. Like before I could feel it almost down to my down. I'm trying to read through the comment. Yeah, traditional Thomist. I had a really great show with him on Meaning of Catholic last week. If you weren't able to watch that live stream, go back. It was a great show talking about, well, we use the SSPX as kind of an example to talk about trads eating their own right now.
It's a bummer.
Yeah.
We need to come together, folks.
We do. Yeah. Yep. So we have a great one on there. Definitely Nicholas is just amazing. He is the traditional Thomist. Make sure you go follow his channel too. He's just awesome. I have to find where there you see your comment. There you go. So okay, what should I when I'm tasting this, what are you thinking I do smell the leather. That's such an interesting scent, like to smell that and know that that's what that is.
Right. Well, and leather is like a great example of leather is surprisingly pleasant to smell. Like I don't know, if everyone like has a memory of smelling a baseball glove, that type of thing,
absolutely.
But you don't associate it with food, right?
No, yeah.
But it is pleasant to smell even on a drink.
Yeah, I smell something sweet with it, like sugar. Yeah, sugar.
Yeah, so this one, the flavor doesn't present itself strongly, but it isn't nearly as tannic as
it's not as acidic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of let it sit there.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So tannins basically are our structure.
Yes.
I think it's protein structure that again you have to. It's almost like a proto-digestion processing tannins.
Yeah.
So like it's very present in red wines.
I was gonna say yes, red wine, and I tend to love red wine.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
That would be my preferred beverage when I'm not drinking bourbon.
Yeah.
Which, when am I not drinking bourbon?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, red wine's amazing. Alyssa and I honeymooned in Napa Valley, and
wow.
It was a great experience.
Great wine.
Yeah, great red wine in particular.
Great scenery.
Yeah, beautiful.
Talk about talking about beauty.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Taking it in.
Exactly. And so the pictures of us were all starry-eyed the whole time too, which is the way it should be, at a honeymoon. But so this one I'm getting definitely like a very pleasant mouthfeel. I feel like it's almost kind of like rolling around or something. And then like I feel like there's still like something kind of like how with sugar cookies sometimes they can get kind of like they're like slightly overbaked, they're kind of crunchy or something.
Yeah.
Like almost like overbaked confectionery sugar or something, Yeah. And then this one has a nice finish too. Like you just notice how it kind of finishes real clean.
And it's not just like hanging out on the tongue.
Like the last like Knob Creek, it has a long finish, but you're also kind of like clutching on for dear life. Like we need to go back and play the reel of you like taking that last shot where you were like, oh, okay, I'm glad we're not dead right now.
I'm okay, folks.
Yeah, she's okay. So this is a ride. This is
Darren leather. So Darren and I are going to be doing a live talking about how to repurpose bottles, I believe, especially bottle caps. Darren, you have to get to know Darren. He's been teaching me how to cross stitch.
Okay.
He is like a man of many weird and random talents, and I'm here for it. I love it. I'm learning so much. And yes, I have almost finished my cross stitch, but I messed up at least one significant part of it, so I have to redo it. I'm going to send it to you, Darren, when I'm done.
That's like another aspect of masculinity that's just been thrown out the window. Is like, oh, like the only things you can be good at are the things that you're a specialist about. Yeah. Like it's a way in which men are compartmentalized.
I think it's so cool. So like my stepdad's father was a woodworker growing up.
Yeah, great.
And he made I remember he made this lamp that was very beautiful. He hand carved it, and it was just lovely. And he helped my siblings and I make like what was it? The Arch Day Triumph or whatever for like a school project.
Sure.
And he was just very talented with his hands. And I think for some reason that's like frowned upon today when you're good, when men have nimble hands. And it's like, those are the trades that were traditionally for men.
Right. Absolutely.
Women were usually taking care of the family and like feeding animals and
Right.
stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like bread baking and maybe weaving, things like
sure,
that.
Of course, yeah.
But men were doing a lot of the finer work when it came to
St. Louis Martin was a watchmaker, right?
Yeah.
And a very successful one.
Yeah.
And Zelly was made lace, right? Lace maker. And so it's very interesting how and then like this is a great example of complementarity, right? Is that Louis actually sold his business to support Zelly's lace making business because it was more lucrative and also just like better balance for them. Because watchmakers, it's like so focused. I have like a
third-class relic of theirs on my little mantle.
Oh, sweet.
There.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, they're wonderful saints. And so there's like another example of like men, like that's part of who we are is loving details, loving and appreciating details, and cultivating the skills.
Cultivating that. Are men really cultivating that today?
Oh, I think that you're punished as a man to do, unless like there's kind of like two things that you can be doing as a man is like working out and video games. Like that's like the way the culture talks about what men should be doing, and like neither of those things are actually cultivating any kind of aesthetic sensibilities at all. Right?
I mean, working out, I suppose maybe could be in terms of discipline. Like
sure, yeah, definitely.
Like my husband, Lars gets up every day and at like 4:30 in the morning and goes to the gym before he works all day outside as a lineman, which I think is crazy. I always tell him, I'm like, I don't hate myself as much as you hate yourself. I would never get up.
Oh, men need to do that kind of stuff.
But it's good for him. It's sanctifying for him. Right. And for me, I'm just not in a place in my life where that makes sense. My sanctification happens in dealing with screaming toddlers all day. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference there. But I think we're not cultivating authentic virtue in men anymore. Right. And I think virtuous men do pick up on details, and they're paying attention. Like they're more attuned to their wives, to the other people in their lives, because I just think virtuous men are less, sin sort of darkens the intellect, right?
Absolutely, sure.
And so we just don't see anything but ourselves when we are living lives of sin.
Right.
And virtuous men are more prone to looking outside of themselves and noticing where they can meet other people's needs, which is more natural for women because it's required of us more. When it comes to our children, our very bodies have to be given up. Right. But it takes something very special and unique for men to sort of be drawn out of themselves.
Right. Right. I think it's true. And I think that it's also true that there's a way in which, so I'm trying to remember who wrote High Beauty. Is it Hopkins? Or Manley Hopkins? But I don't know. He talks about the dappled things. And how we can be drawn into the beauty of things. And one of the things that he lists in the poem is all of the kit and gear, and he's talking about fishermen, and it's this idea that like of course fishing is a distinctly masculine trade, obviously.
It's super fun though,
right? Oh, it's wonderful. But
don't make me touch the fish, because I'm always afraid of getting pricked by the spines, right? But I love it.
So it's a great example of like a right attentiveness to the work of fishing, like tying a lure properly. Like I do this hilarious thing most Father's Days where I take all of my 8 kids out fishing, or 7 because of the baby.
Is that hilarious?
Yeah, it's hilarious because it's a complete disaster. Like it
sounds like a cluster.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. Definitely. Yeah. So if a child isn't drowned, it's a success. If we catch a fish, that's a miracle, right? Exactly, right. It helps them understand how miraculous it was that our Lord produced fish on multiple occasions, right?
Yes.
And
that's so funny.
Yeah, but I do like fishing. I enjoy hunting and fishing a lot. And when I take the kids fishing, it's a great example of like certain amounts of attention to detail are essential to successfully hooking your fish. The whole thing, not only just like catching a fish, but enjoying yourself, appreciating the scenery. Like if you don't care about tangles, if you don't watch things like that, you're gonna lose it all. And so men are definitely in a position where we can be.
That's so true for hunting in general.
Yeah, definitely.
Like deer hunting, anything else. It's like you have to be paying attention to what direction the wind is blowing.
Right. Yeah.
You know, is this deer going to catch my scent down this
Right.
way?
Exactly.
Should I be positioned in another
Right.
way? Is it going to come over the river on
Right.
this side? Is there a hill back there or not?
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Right.
But like, yeah, having the forethought and analyzing the situation and seeing how to best position yourself.
Because a lot of times when we talk about like, so women are the caretakers or the homemakers, and men are the one who are out in the world. Like, we think about this in modern terms in incorrect ways, that like, oh, men are like responsible for the whole world or something. Like, no, like the original idea is that there's localism.
Yeah.
Like as a way of life, like men are responsible for building the society that's around them. Like I mentioned, like the order of society is the family first, and then the social order emerges directly from the family. And you know, in a lot of the papal documents, they call that civil society. And it's called civil because you have to get along with people, right? Like, it's not civil just because there's government. Like, like you have to work with the people around you. There has to be not only rights but bonds, right? So this is something Anthony Esolen talks a lot about, actually, is the importance of bonds in society. Bonds are formed by kinship. Right?
There's such a good book. Okay, so I recommend this to a lot of people that I talk to. It's a book called, I don't have it up here anymore. This bookshelf has now been taken over as our homeschooling bookshelf, but the book is called Born for Love: Why Empathy is Essential and Endangered. And it talks about something as fundamental as empathy and how that's not cultivated anymore. And my griping on feminism, when you have mothers leaving the home, they can't form proper attachments with their children.
Right.
And those attachments are so important for being able to develop empathy in the human person. So for example, in like these Russian orphanages where there are tons of children, and this is no offense to anyone who has used the cry it out method for, like, you know, sleep training, all that stuff. But one of the reasons why so many of these children have issues is you bring these children, they've been left by their parents, and they go to these orphanages where there are dozens of children and not enough people to care for them. And so what happens is that these children end up crying. They can't be soothed properly because they've been severed from their mother, and now there isn't enough hands to rock them. And babies need their moms. They need constant. That's how their parasympathetic nervous system calms down, because babies actually don't understand that they are different persons from the mother because they haven't been before. And so what they say is that it's really hard for these children to experience empathy because they cry it out, and they eventually stop crying, not because they've learned to self-soothe, but because they've learned no one is going to answer their call. Right. And so they internalize this, and they stop communicating. That's how they communicate. And then that spills over as they get older, because they can't form proper attachments. They cannot communicate. And then you live a life of these wounded children trying to connect with the world, but being too afraid to do so because they've learned that it's not a trustworthy place. Right. And you need empathy for the most, and trust, like an understanding that your needs will be met on the most fundamental level of humanness, right? Like the most fundamental human desire, apart from being with God, right? Which we don't always realize, but is to know and be known and loved. Right. As we are. Like,
are you familiar with Conrad Bars at all? So he's a Catholic psychologist, and he has a number of books about psychological wholeness and healing. And he basically makes a very similar argument to the one that you just made, that the basis of all healthy psychological states is affirmation. Right.
Words of affirmation are my love language.
I've heard you say that before. Well, and so it's very interesting, and like so if you think about this sort of on an existential level, like, what is affirmation? It's the thing that you do when you are empathetic with someone. Yeah. Right. Like empathy is a precondition to affirmation. It's a way to connect. You can't really affirm someone, or like, I'm sure if your love language is words of affirmation, then you probably are actually hurt by compliments that are empty compliments.
100%. I hate flattery. Right. Like for me, and this is something that's been so interesting, and talk about the complementarity in the married life. Like my husband, beautiful, lovely human being, and we complement each other very well.
Beautiful.
He's beautiful. Yeah. He's very strong lineman, grew up on a dairy farm, very handsome, but like communication is really hard for him. So words of affirmation, does not come naturally for him at all. And that was actually a part of myself that I had to die to myself in that way and start to be cognizant of how he shows love so I could appreciate it. And so for him, acts of service is how he shows love predominantly. And so I had to learn, like, if he's running another load of laundry for me because I, wasn't able to get to it, that's him loving me.
Right.
And I have to
Who's watching all the kids right now?
And he's watching all the kids. Like, I couldn't do any of the stuff that I do if it weren't for him.
Absolutely.
And I had to learn to sort of retailor how I receive love so that I could receive it, because otherwise I wouldn't, and I would be a resentful, bitter woman.
Right.
Right. And so I think sometimes we do have to make those adjustments. Now, does that mean that, like, he should never try to meet me where I'm at?
Most definitely not. Like, if you're listening, guys, you're
No, but I mean, there is a lot of that give and take.
Yeah, definitely.
And you have to sort of be able to step away from your own desires to, like, look at a situation objectively. I think especially if you want a successful marriage, you have to step away from your own, I don't know, like being so self-absorbed. Like, that's when we were dating, those were the things that were problematic, is when I was, because if there was another guy that was, like, giving me a lot of verbal affirmation, of course I was paying attention, because I wasn't getting that in the relationship that I was in. Yeah. And a lot of people, worldly people, would have said, well, that just means Lars isn't right for you.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And,
I married my opposite too. Like, Alyssa's completely different personality than me. I'm extroverted. She's introverted.
Yes.
I'm like, in terms of big five qualities, I'm, like, very creative, and she's just very
more analytic.
Yeah, very analytic. That's not one of the big five, but, like, in terms of she's, like, highly conscientious, whereas I can, like, not always notice things that I should, typical of a creative person. And so I think that absolutely that in marriage, not only do you have to deal with the significant difference between men and women. Men are sort of psychologically attenuated to things, and women are attenuated to persons, and there are those sort of differences. But real personality differences that are driven by temperament and your psychological profile are huge.
Yeah. Which, if you haven't watched Rob and Anthony's interview with the couple who wrote the 5 temperaments God gave you, I believe, or what is it called? The Temperament God Gave You. It's a great interview. Go to the Avoiding Babylon channel and watch it. It was a fun interview.
Okay. Wow. Sounds great. Yeah. I haven't listened to that one. And so I think that, like, as a couple, especially early in dating, I dated my wife for 3 years, and 2 of the years were long distance. And so that was a huge part for us, is learning to communicate verbally over a long distance. It actually overcame a lot of hurdles that I think couples have to learn early in marriage when they're together for the first time, which is the way it should always be. Is having to overcome some of those trials together.
Oh my gosh,
under the sacrament and the protection of marriage, because true. I think that that's one of the things that the church has to offer uniquely about marriage, is this idea that there's grace that's actually from without in the sacrament. Like, the sacrament's made between the husband and the spouse, but they are not the sacrament. Like, the sacrament is a grace that God's working through.
Right. 3 to be married, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right, exactly. So very much along those lines, like, it's up to the couple to be open to the work that God has in store for them that's beyond their own reckoning.
That's so funny. So I remember sitting down with our priest. So Lars was, like, he was converting at the time. He had he was confirmed into the church the week of our wedding. I want to say the Thursday before we got married, and we got married that Saturday. And anyway, when we were sitting down first with the priest asked us how many kids we wanted to have. And I was like, I don't know, I kind of want, like, 5 kids. I'm stupid. and Lars, because he's more introverted and, like, intentional about what he's saying, he goes, however many God gives us. And the priest is like, bingo, that's the right answer. And I was like, I'm the Catholic, and you just made me look like an idiot. I was super embarrassed.
That's hilarious. That's so great.
But it is so much like that openness, that receptivity, which, is interesting, because that is more within the nature of woman. But really, when you're married and the two become one flesh, you sort of have to learn to embody that together, and it looks a little bit different. Yeah,
every couple is unique. I mean, I think that healthy Catholic marriages never look alike, and I think
that's a good point.
Yeah, so I think that there's a real way in which, like, every Catholic couple has to discover how God's going to present their vocation. And, like, one of the things that Alyssa and I are very blessed on, so we have 8 children. My oldest is 12. My youngest just turned 1.
Is it Virginia? Is Virginia?
Yeah,
your younger?
Virginia
I love that
Dolores.
name.
Virginia is my grandma on my mom's side, and Dolores is my grandma who's still alive on my dad's side. So
Fun.
wonderful, good women, good, strong Catholic women. And we just had one baby that was a miscarriage, and so like it's a very much a blessing to have had these 9 children in our life.
I remember that. That was sad.
Yeah, it was. It was terrible.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to be able to have that joy and that intensity and not necessarily know what's next. Like, that's one of the things I thought. I wasn't sure if you were going this way, but like, so John Paul II talks about how the individual essence of the person is incommunicable. That means that you couldn't express who you are in a definition, right? Like I can say my definition of
complex.
Well, it's actually impossible to define individuals. Like it's philosophically impossible. We define things by the genus and the species, right? And we find the species making difference. So we're rational animals, right? Well, I don't have an essence. Like I'm a human being. Like my essence is to be human. There's not an Andrew Lang essence that's distinct.
That can be replicated in any way.
Unlike like the angels, for example, where they're each a unique form,
nature,
right? Their nature is individual. And so as humans, we're in this unique position of being individual, right? Yeah. And so like this is one of the glories of the hypostatic union, for example. If you think about the miracle of Christ uniting himself to human nature, that he was an individual man, and that somehow through the work of being this individual man, he also is taking on human nature. So it's like something very unique and special with the human race being what it is, that it's able to be saved through a man taking on flesh, right?
Or through like God taking on flesh.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't want anyone to clip that out and be like, he's a heretic.
Right. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Christ was only a man.
I think there was just another Twitter poll on that. It was like, was God a divine person and a human person, or was he just a divine person? Or was, it's like, and so many Catholics are so poorly catechized on that, so it's like, of course he was a divine person that took on human flesh. Right. But a lot of people are like, well, he was both, because that's kind of what they're taught.
Right. Well, and what I think is very interesting too is so again, if it goes back to this discussion about the nature of things, right? Yeah. That if you look at human nature, that it's sort of our unique opportunity to participate in a world that's full of essential beauty. Like there's all kinds of beautiful things out there.
Oh my goodness, yeah. You just go outside. You're
right,
like, wow,
exactly, right.
This is beautiful.
Or like looking at children. Like I think that's sort of one of the unique vocations of a parent, is to be the sole appreciator and proprietor really of the beauty of each individual child, right? That's one of the things I think is proper to women, is to understand the uniqueness of each of their kids. But I think it's also in his own way the responsibility of the father who may receive that from his wife, because he's not able to always be present to his children in the same way, to then orient that child's uniqueness to the world, to society.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling, is because you spend so much more time with your children than you would perhaps otherwise if you're sending your kids off to school at a very young age. Like I have a hard time sending my kids off somewhere for like an hour, like a doctor's appointment or something. Sure, like my oldest was doing occupational therapy for a while. I was like, oh my goodness, like an hour without me. And they're like, there's this strange person that I don't really know all that well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, I don't know how comfortable I feel with that. But at the same time, then I sort of had to sit back and go, there are people sending their kids off for 8 hours a day. Right. And they're not even 7 years old. And I thought, is there something wrong with me, or is there something wrong with the system?
Well, we know that there's something wrong with you.
There's clearly something. There's a lot of things wrong with me.
With all of us. Clearly. But especially you. Yeah. So that's words of affirmation, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I needed that, like, little humble pie.
I know you needed that. Just think about that next time. Yeah, next time you need to see a physical therapist or whatever you're talking about, like, that would be great.
Angela, you are the problem.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So you know.
It's not
that's good.
Yeah, it's not that your kid has a broken arm or whatever it is that you're taking.
It's broken mom.
Yeah, broken mom. Yeah, right. Yeah, you're gonna need to see a different kind of therapist. Yeah.
No, for real
great. Though. But it's so funny how like attachment is the back end of affirmation. right? So affirmation
You
means
do naturally the
right,
more affirmed you are, you become more
right,
bonded with
right,
that person
exactly. And
because you feel seen,
right,
right?
well, and like, so can we talk
And
about this? Like the
yeah.
whole feeling seen thing, like this is like
It
millennial,
is. I mean,
like
that's millennial language for something I think
I think
a
it means like the
truth.
bond of love, right? Like, is that
Yeah,
what you mean?
I think acknowledgement.
Yes.
You
Okay.
know what I mean?
Thanks.
Like
Yeah, I like
that's
where you're
for
going with
me,
that.
like when I look at the most broken parts of who I am.
Yes.
A lot of the time I just want to be acknowledged.
Yes.
And I think so many of us, if we grew up in a broken home and maybe we just didn't feel like we were constantly striving.
Right.
Like for me, I struggle with perfectionism.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to be acknowledged that I'm good, innately, that I'm good, and that I don't have to
I've
prove
refuted
myself.
that thoroughly.
Yes, no, I'm
Now
obviously
that
terrible,
question's off the
and my
table.
children
Yeah.
need therapy.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. Now that
That's
you
perfect.
don't have to
No,
worry
that's
about that
great.
problem anymore. Yeah.
No, but but as in my humanness and my brokenness,
Right.
that's what I struggle with the most, honestly.
Sure.
Is and I find myself trying to be a perfectionist. I'm breaking myself of this, like the other day, the house was a disaster and I had something else to do. I had to go to the cities for something nice. I thought to myself, Angela, there are things that are more important than having a clean home.
Right.
You know,
Sure, of course.
like
Absolutely,
obviously, but like those perfectionistic tendencies, I feel like they will creep in, and I feel like and then there's this anxiety. But it really, at the end of the day, if somebody were to just say, Angela, you did a really nice job today, again, the words of affirmation, I'd be like, thank you.
Yes,
That would mean the best gifts I've ever gotten from people are when they send me random letters about some impact, or like something about our friendship. Like I have a friend who converted to Catholicism, and he sent me a letter when he was in some of his formation. His spiritual director told him to write a letter to all the people in his life that had an impact on his spiritual life. And so I got this really unexpected letter because I was a horrible example of a Catholic in college. I mean, I was out partying every weekend, and I went to mass every Sunday, and I like to talk about God, and my faith was like kind of important to me, but I didn't understand very much. I just was a little bit more zealous than maybe some other people had been. Like that was the only thing I had going for me. It's not much.
Glad you hung on to that.
I know. So that was one thing, and that had an impact on him, and he converted me. He sent me this lovely letter years later,
wow,
and
awesome.
it touched me. I still have it.
Okay.
It was like that was one of the most meaningful things that I've ever received in my life. And anytime, like if it's an anniversary or something, and Lars writes in a card, and he actually takes the time when he has time to like write out something meaningful, I'm like, I don't care about the gift. Like, this is beautiful. Right. This is what I want forever. I'm so sentimental that way.
Oh, I'm the same way. I love saving postcards and little notes from people. That makes a huge difference.
But I think it's that acknowledgement of like seeing you as you are and saying like, I appreciate you. I love you. This is what I see in you. And this is where I see your dignity, and I see God working through you. That actually is always what means the most to me, is when people can say to me like, this is where I see God in you. Because to me, I'm like, at the end of the day, it's not so much about me. I mean, I would sometimes, I'm vain and proud, and admittedly, of course, I like it to think it's about me somehow. But really, at the core, the moments that I'm most touched is when people can say to me, "This is where I see God working in your life and working through you." And I think, you see that in me. Like you see,
kind of like how our Lord looks at Zacchaeus, right?
Yes,
like
exactly. It's like, how do you see that in me? I don't understand how you could possibly see that, because when I look in the mirror, that's not what I see, because the way I talk to myself is a way that I would never talk to anybody else.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right. So when people say that they see that stuff in me, I'm genuinely blown away. I just couldn't imagine that.
Right. Well, and I think that, again, like this is the root of empathy, is not only a precondition to be present to other people, but an affirmation of their goodness.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because there's a way in which, like,
we need to be affirmed of that. I think.
Right. Well, for sure. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the effect of original sin, right? Is separation from God, and therefore a complete lack of orientation. Right. Right. Yeah. And so that's also connected with integration, right? Because part of wholeness is being ordered to the right ends in life. Right. I think that's when we talked about integration at the relevant radio banquet when we talked about
got
body and
super
soul.
engrossed in the conversation. We're like, we gotta go.
Everyone was over there. We're like, well, okay,
we gotta go eat.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. And so, like, that's the idea of wholeness being ordered towards fulfillment in the ultimate sense, that we are ultimately ordered to happiness with God,
right.
and that's going to be what's going to be interesting about heaven is that it's going to be an act of seeing for us, and it's going to be the privilege of being able to see God, and then we see ourselves in light of the whole order of providence. And so in that sense, like sight is so critical, right? It's funny because I'm around teenagers at school, and so they talk about being seen like it's a TikTok thing, like I need to be seen, like do this goofy dance thing or whatever. And like it's sort of like an objectification of the sight, really is. Right? Which is a huge problem, obviously, right? I mean,
we've really commodified human beings,
right?
In almost every level,
right? Exactly. Well, and we've particularly commodified sight through pornography, and that's like a plague for teens right now.
And almost I mean, let's be honest, it's like everybody.
Oh, definitely. Well, like what's like
you have a porn theater in your pocket,
yeah, I guess so. Right. I've never thought about it that way, but you're totally
true.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
It's
yeah,
true.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and even just the amount of Americans that consume pornography, something like 60%. I was just reading about it, and I was like, I can't believe it's this much. And so there's this like real challenge of sight is like probably actually the place to start as far as reordering people, because sight is the sort of thing
and refining your senses, kind of going back to what you're talking about. And
like you probably aren't going to bring someone back to the faith at the bar. Sometimes you will, right? Like that's like Walker Percy,
I've had
right?
a lot of conversations at the bar about Jesus.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure they were very good.
They were deeply theological.
Yes, I'm sure everyone really appreciated them.
Yeah, they're all in a better
I actually remember some girl hitting on my husband, early in our marriage at the bar, and he thought it was kind of funny. She was he has like one tattoo, and she was, oh, you should have all these tattoos. And he sort of laughed and he goes, you should talk to my wife. She would love to talk to you.
Nice.
Like, hey, let's talk about Jesus.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. You're talking about Jesus right now, ma'am. Sit down. Like
you need Jesus.
Yeah, right now.
Talk to my wife.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I think so. So that's one of the things that I think, speaking of what you should be doing at high school, like you need to be cultivating a sense of beauty in teenagers that is rooted in the beauty of creation and in the beauty of personhood fully understood, right? Hard to do that when they're only in your home, because this is
your argument.
This is the start of the argument. Yeah, I want to hear it. Right, exactly. Well, first of all, there's some things that you just can't teach very well in the home. A lot of social teaching is best taught in an environment where people have exposure to different ideas. So, like, for example, if you want to argue for the universality of the Catholic Church, right, it's going to be helpful to have people who have an experience of faith that differs slightly from yours, and yet is fundamentally aligned in agreement about, like,
that's a really good point.
I mean, and it needs to happen at the right point. So I'm not yes. I send my kids to a Catholic elementary school, and it's a good parochial school for what it is, but it's definitely not like academically challenging for them, or even like the most like rigorously Catholic. I think it's actually mostly good for culturally Catholic reasons to send them there, that like, okay, so we're building the local church and there's a sense of place.
So that's how you justify it.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Right. You justify your messes. I justify sending my kids setting up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, of course I've thought about it. Homeschooling is hard.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like I don't suggest it for the faint of heart. I really don't.
Right.
I never, ever, 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 ever thought I would be homeschooling my kids. That is
right. Oh, it's not really, I mean, unless you were homeschooled and you experienced the benefits of it, which now we're like maybe 2 generations into like serious homeschooling in the United States. Like it's relatively speaking a pretty new phenomena in terms of like availability of curricula and social networking and a lot of stuff. Like when I talk to people homeschooled in the 90s, it was all flying solo. Like nobody had community. And so
that would be so, I mean, that would be so much
crazy
harder
hard, right?
It is now.
And it's still very hard. Like I completely grant that it's hard. And so, I mean, that's where Catholic elementary schools have merit, even though they have for sure their own problems.
So yeah, I was gonna say, so for example, because we have a Catholic school here.
Right. St. Michael,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a big Catholic school.
Mhm.
And, one of my biggest hesitations is, teachers who are not themselves Catholic.
Huge problem.
And students who are not Catholic. And the thing is you can't control what other kids are bringing into the school.
Right.
Or their home environment. Like,
Right.
I don't think that I'm somebody who's like needlessly overprotecting my children. But the reality is that, you have one parent who thinks it's okay to give their kids a cell phone at 5 years old.
Or
and
12 or 15 or 16.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these things are getting exchanged on the school bus or
Right.
whatever. It's or even an understanding of human sexuality. I mean, I've talked to families who have children who have sort of embraced heterodox sexuality because and even despite being in a Catholic school system. So
absolutely, yeah.
What do you say to that? Do you think that's more of a problem rooted in the home, where the home is not being properly formative? Or, I mean, because
it's both, I mean, it is the responsibility of the parents to be the primary educators.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's an incontrovertible way in which parents are responsible for their children's education, whether they send them to school or not.
Yeah.
The papal encyclical that I often refer people to look at the fundamentals of Catholic education is Divini Ilius Magistri. So Pius XI published it in, I think, 1923. It's like right between the two world wars, pre-conciliar. So like very like solid.
Orthodox.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Very solid, very strong argument. And like he makes an argument that human beings, by nature social, have social institutions that emerge by nature.
Yes.
And it's the responsibility of the church to be the protector of those institutions that are fundamental to the things that are the church's responsibility. So the salvation of souls, well, obviously you want to cultivate the units of society where the soul can encounter salvation, and the family, of course, primarily, but then by extension, education is really the next thing, because there are certain things that simply can't be taught in the home fully. Right.
And that's something that I've struggled with, because I'm totally, so I actually kind of look forward to the high school years because that's more in line with my interests.
Right.
Honestly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'll teach handwriting and basic math and stuff, and I'll grit my teeth while I do it. But I'm really looking forward to the like invigorating conversation that I can have with my children, where I can sort of develop their intellects a little bit and their capacity for reason. I look forward to that. Absolutely. And I look forward to reading things like the Iliad or the Odyssey or like all these things, the Divine Comedy. But at the same time, I recognize in some of my children already that need that they have for that social component.
Right.
And I question, like, okay, well, what about sports? Well, sports is, I mean, it becomes a lifestyle for a lot of families.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
It's designed to be a lifestyle.
It's designed to be. So it's designed to sort of take you away from the family. I'm not okay with that.
Of course.
You know?
You shouldn't be.
So then the alternative is like, okay, maybe sending them to Catholic high school, which I'm not opposed to, because I think at that point, I mean, it's sort of the beginning of letting go. Like so much of life is letting go, right? Like as you mature, you're letting go of yourself. Like in the early parenthood stages, you're letting go of yourself. You're learning to let go of your expectations of what you thought life was going to be. And then you have your children and you are letting go of them gradually.
And it's not just letting them go into the abyss, it's imparting them with responsibility.
Yeah.
Recognizing that they have the ability to choose the good.
Right.
And that is something that they can't do fully on their own away.
Entrustment. Like I'm afraid of sending them off to college and they haven't had that a proper amount of experience where I can have them on a tether, so to speak.
Right. Sure.
Where they can sort of experience some sort of individuation, but at the same time be tethered enough to home that we can sort of somewhat manage what's going on and sort of guide them. I'm afraid of sending them off to college and they're just like free reign. Like I have a sibling who went to college and he went wild, he partied, he loved it. And then,
and that's sort of like, unfortunately, the staple of college culture, if you're just taking it sort of on the pagan level. So there's definitely a way in which, like, I think that it's probably unwise for that to happen all at once. There needs to be
it needs to be gradual, which is where I could see the argument for high school, Catholic high school. A good Catholic high school could be merited. But at the same time, I'm afraid of exposing my children to just other kids who, because I mean, depending on the school, like the school you're a part of, a lot of the families know each other. It's a very tight-knit community.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
You get to some of these bigger schools like Providence Academy, for example, if you're in the Twin Cities area. It's a much larger school, and there are so many other families that are involved there that are not faithfully striving to live virtuous lives. So how would you, I mean, you're doing it, you have kids, like how do you guys approach that? You say you send some of your kids to like a Catholic pre-K or not pre-K, but
just elementary school. Yeah. Well, so I mean, with regard to high schools in particular, so like I don't know, where'd you go to high school?
I went to public school.
Yeah, me too.
Cokato High School.
Yeah, I went to Maple Grove Senior High. So
so you're close by. Yeah.
So like my parents' conversation with me when I went to high school was, "We're throwing you to the wolves, but we think that you're gonna survive." And I was like,
"We'll find out." So you were homeschooled up to that point?
Well, I went to Catholic elementary school. I went to St. Raphael's for 9 years,
that's right.
And it was a good experience. I never had a non-Catholic teacher. All the kids in my class were Catholic.
That's honestly why we didn't send our kids to another school that we were living by. It was because half the teachers weren't Catholic, and I thought to myself, I don't want my kids going to like weekly mass at school and wondering why their teacher is not going up for Holy Communion.
I think that there are certain things that when you look at authoritative church documents about the nature of Catholic education, that show beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of the educators need to be Catholic.
Thank you. Why don't we do that? I would feel so much better if we did that. I know it's hard because good Catholic educators are hard to come by.
I mean, I think that that's a big part of it. I think that the church, unfortunately, what happened in the United States was there was a national collapse of Catholic education that happened with the 60s. Really, I mean,
so you would say coalesces kind of with
the sexual revolution, absolutely,
and second. Would you say that Second Vatican Council?
Sure, yeah,
not?
Definitely, yeah. I mean,
because I feel like they all kind of come together at the same moment. You have the same apex,
right? Definitely. Well, yeah. So I think that you're looking at a global phenomena, and the Second Vatican Council wasn't immune to some of the things that were happening in the world ideologically, where it was just plainly anti-intellectual, and in particular there was this, as you mentioned in other podcasts, like syncretism, right, of ideas where everyone is right. We need to find a way to get along,
kind of that pluralism,
right? Exactly. Religious pluralism in particular in the United States has existed since the early church, or since the founding, not the early church. So like, I don't get confusing church history and American history.
He's had a little bit too much bourbon.
Right, yeah, we need to get to the last one.
Yeah, we do.
I'm thinking about this.
Let's start it up.
So in the United States, religious pluralism has been a problem because what has resulted is this emergence of the public school system. Like the public school system, to be honest, is what I blame a lot of the ills of the American mind on. And I'm not the only person who thinks this, of course, but public education effectively democratizes knowledge, which is contrary to the notion of knowledge. Like truth by its nature is ordered. It's ordered to higher and lower things.
But we did that in the church too. Like, so I feel like there's kind of this social phenomenon, like socialism, where we have sort of relegated as parents all of our duties to other institutions, like the government and the church. I mean, you see it with catechesis.
Right.
There's zero catechesis in the home. We expect the church to completely form our children. And then when they come out totally ill-formed or unformed, we can't understand why our kids are no longer practicing Catholics.
And we're not even educated enough to see where the problems
are. Exactly. And that's, I mean, so all of this phenomena kind of comes together around the same time.
Well, there were even in the 19th century, there was a lot of secularism in the United States. And in particular, John Dewey was very responsible for the popularization of ideas of education, that education is ultimately meant to be useful.
Yeah.
Right. That this is a service to the public, and that
it's a means, not an end.
Right. Exactly. And so if you even have what seemingly seems like a minor shift from education because it's worthwhile, or because it's like we want educated citizens, like that was something that was present in the founders' thought, to we just need to effectively commodify people so that they're an economic benefit.
Money,
You're right. Exactly.
I always
right.
forget money. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what happened in the United States, was that the public system arose out of this like commitment to false principles. And unfortunately, Catholic schools, who, if you look at the history of Catholic schools, many of the founders of Catholic schools were saints. We just recently, had Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton's
So
feast
what
day.
do you, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton,
yes.
perfect example,
Yes.
because I've heard so many times people say that women should not be educators, or they shouldn't be teaching the faith.
Yeah.
And I say, from the pulpit, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
But in terms of history, and I mean, you look within our homes, of course we're teaching the faith.
Yeah,
and you look outside of that, you have nuns who have run Catholic schools since the dawn of time.
Absolutely.
So, like, where's the line? I mean, obviously, I agree. Not from the pulpit. You have a father who should be leading his flock, right?
Course,
That's so different than me, for example. This is where the criticism often comes. Like, women like me having a podcast, I'm not necessarily even teaching people. I'm just talking about the faith.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't, my job here is not to like instruct, inform necessarily. If you learn something, that's super awesome. But like, I don't posit myself to be a teacher on behalf of the church. I'm not, whatever. I just love the faith and I want to share it with people. And I should be allowed to talk about my faith and our faith in a public forum,
of course,
without people argue. Like, it shouldn't be
there's like let's
you know what I mean? Like I'm not, I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, hot take, like here's a good litmus test if you're traditionally leaning. Is this the sort of bullcrap that a fundamentalist Christian would say? And if the answer is maybe, rethink your position, because traditionalist thought is more sophisticated than it's as black as white as women shouldn't teach and men should teach. Like,
thank you.
It just isn't that simple.
I needed validation, apparently. I don't know. It's so frustrating because to me, I just look at the situation and I say, women like Saint Teresa of Avila, like if she shouldn't be, then why was she told to write a book about, write about her life story? Why was she writing, explaining the interior life and how to pray properly if she was not supposed to be teaching? Like, if you really don't think women should be teach, then should they be writing books? Like, where do you draw the line because it's not just word of mouth. Women are not only teachers, vocally, but we teach within what we do and in writing and all these other things. So at what point, because it's funny, the best part to me is when people write books on how women should not be teaching. It's like, wait a minute, you're a woman and you're teaching something in a book. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
Cognitive dissonance.
It's just, it's like, do you not see this at all? Or am I just totally pathological and trying to justify?
It just doesn't make sense. Like, that's the thing. I feel like there's a lack of sophistication or nuance in like failing to recognize that there's a difference between, ordinary differences in vocation, that ordinarily women should be in the home and be homemakers.
Sure.
And failing to distinguish that, well, that doesn't preclude the fact that they could also be teaching.
It's not
right.
It's not
even in the public sphere, right?
I say this to people all the time. It's not always either or. It is both and.
Right.
A lot of things, and that's something that makes Catholicism so beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that so often it's both and it's not either or. And I'm not saying in terms of like moral dogmatic theology. Of course, it's either or in a lot of things. But when we talk about,
we got a relativist here.
I know, but when we talk about other things, it's like, a lot of the times it's either or I'm sorry, it's both and.
No, I think that it's a typically Protestant way of looking at things, that you just exclude the possibility of individual distinctiveness. Yeah. So like, I think that it really is rooted in this kind of like Calvinistic idea of we have to predetermine what everyone is doing in order for them to be safe. So at Holy Spirit Academy, I'm teaching American Humanities, which is history and literature. And in the history class, we touch on a number of the things that we're talking about in terms of the influence of Protestantism in the founders. But in literature, we read a couple of books that kind of focus on Puritanism. So
thank you.
Right. So
that's awesome.
That's what we're talking about. Really, is we're talking about like the Scarlet Letter.
Puritanism is a huge component of why feminism took such root.
Definitely.
I don't think people realize that Puritanism is a lot of why there was so much pushback, because Puritanism is not a sustainable ideology.
Most definitely not. Yeah. It's not even really a religion when you get down to it, because what it ends up being is more of like a moral code or something than an or disposition.
And then you can understand why people think that sex is shameful, right?
Oh,
because
definitely.
That's basically what it taught. But
and not even sex, like the act like that people have genders or something.
Right.
Yeah, right.
We're supposed to be like these androgynous things that are asexual.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so there's a real way in which, like, if you limit yourself to kind of very narrow ideas of what the whole human race should be doing on a particular level, you're just going to end up making all kinds of claims that just don't make sense in the concrete. So, like, for example, take the example of women teaching. You already made I think a fundamental argument, which is if women are if both parents are primary educators and women are the homemakers, then in the home they need to be educating. Like, it's not a matter of if, it's that they need to be teaching
in some form,
right?
Or
in
fashion,
some way.
absolutely.
Well, for sure, like they're the first witnesses of the faith to their children most of the time. So that's like an act of teaching, right? Undoubtedly, right?
Yeah.
Well, so if there was a woman in the community that was particularly able to impart an area of knowledge that the rest of the community would benefit from, what's the argument?
Why would you not avail yourself of her?
Exactly, right. Well, and here's what's interesting is everyone ends up depending on those people anyway, even if you don't have the legal or moral framework to accept that.
Right.
So, like in the Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne, who's the protagonist, she commits adultery. She has to wear the Scarlet Letter on her breast, right? Well, it changes in the perception of the community from being perceived as an adulteress to being able, because what she does in lieu of being ostracized from society is just go and help people. She's like, okay, so I don't have all these moral, scruples that are holding me down from serving people the way that I think they need to be served. So I'm just going to go do that.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is there's a way in which she transcends the limits of her society, in a way that society was meant to be transcended when you're creating these self-limiting, rigid ideals that have nothing to do with what people could actually be doing to serve each other.
And true traditionalism.
Right, exactly.
I think sometimes we conflate the two as if somehow this is traditional mindset.
Right.
But it's simply not. I mean, you wouldn't have women running hospitals as nuns from the dawn of time if they weren't supposed to have an integral role in healing, or women as educators, even though that's very natural to our state. I mean, if we're not supposed to be teachers, then why is the mother the head of her children? You know what I mean? It's like we're forming all the time. And if there's something that we're really good at forming others in, then of course, like for me, I'm always seeking mentorship. I'm like, that for me has been such a gift in my life, to seek other women who can teach. And people might say, well, but that's on a personal level. Well, we have the gift of technology to share that with other people.
Sure.
So why wouldn't we avail ourselves?
Right. Well, why wouldn't we? I mean, and I think that along those same lines, like people are given individual charisms, right? So that's
Absolutely.
like, I'm the headmaster of Holy Spirit Academy, one of the
administration.
Yes.
Are you good at administration?
I do. Yeah. I think I have a
charism?
gift of administration. Yeah. I do think I've been blessed with that. And one of the things that administration deals with is subsidiarity.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Another lovely Catholic
idea, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. And so in a Catholic high school, one of the things that you want to cultivate in young people is a sense in which providence is distinctly guiding them to their vocation. That's the work of the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit's the sanctifier. It's going to purify you to fulfill the will of the Father. And so to inculcate that in a school environment means that there's a collective sense of the Spirit working in a general way. Like the Holy Spirit really is calling us all to holiness, but in a distinct way, he's calling us all uniquely to our vocation. And each person's vocation is going to be different, even if it's all part of the mystical body, right? And so I think that's, again, like an argument strongly that there's going to be complementarity. Not every woman's going to be a good teacher, but neither is every man, right?
Exactly.
And so,
yes, that's so true.
And it's proper to the order of society, that civil society is built out of the things that are actually people's strengths. Like that's where like the Jordan Peterson meritocracy arguments make a lot of sense to me, is like, let the people that are really good at things develop society. Let the people that have a way of doing things that works and is productive and leads to flourishing, let them be the ones who run those things, right? Like I want a lineman doing my electrical, right? Not me. Like I don't want to get up on a wire, right? I mean, I don't want to have to deal with this problem. Like get someone who has skill to handle that thing. Oh, that's a baby.
Oh no.
9 o'clock. Normally I go to bed at 9. So,
do you go
yeah. That was it. That was examine. That was what 9 o'clock.
I think I've written on my journal to start my exam around 9. So we'll finish up here soon. But
so here's Basil Hayden. So cheers to you. This is our last taste of the evening. So Basil Hayden's also part of Jim Beam's line of small batch spirits, and this is one of their more higher end ones. So I think that this one's going to be pretty. I haven't really been paying attention, but I think it's going to be good. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So
sniff test.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little more muted. I don't know if it's just because we're on number 4.
Strong.
Not a strong nose. I'm getting like a little nuttiness or something, like almost like oh, what am I?
It's just vanilla still is striking me. Apparently,
vanilla's I think vanilla is a property that comes from casks, actually, by the way. So that's kind of interesting.
So it's like true.
Yeah. It's not just imaginary. Yeah. It's just imposing your subjective experience.
No, I smell vanilla and I smell brown sugar.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I definitely get brown sugar. Almost like cashews or something. Oh, and this one's very nutty on the palate. I think like see if you get like cashews. I don't know.
Yeah, cashews are a very mild nut too. So, yes, absolutely.
Macadamians or something.
Mm-hmm. And it takes a minute, and then you start to taste. It is very
kind of how it comes together, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's really good. This one's tasty. I like this one.
I'm sending it home with you then.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously,
that's great.
Thank you for coming on the show. Yeah,
we could trade. Which one of these one of the ones that I brought did you like the best? Did you like the rye? The rye would be good with an old fashioned. You can see why that flavor profile.
I will steal the rye if you take this basil.
Okay. Hayden. All right. Deal.
That's
Cheers. Great. So, I thought that we were also going to talk about Pope Benedict's legacy a little bit. So let's talk about this. I mean, passing of a great man. We've had a few people go on to better things. You know, recently George Neumeyer passed away too. Did you hear about that?
Crazy. My mind, I can't help but be somewhat skeptical.
I know. I was like, definitely like,
because he was such a good servant.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You know, I feel like we do need journalists like him who are willing to call out. And that's I think that's the part that's hard about being Catholic right now. I mean, for myself, and I know other friends of mine that I've talked to, and I think most of us, and maybe I'd be interested to hear if you've had this experience yet, but even since the summer of shame, of just questioning, is this the true church, when you see how much corruption there is?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that's part of the human condition, right? Like we can be corrupted,
right,
especially when we are in positions of power.
Right.
If there's a lot of money. And I didn't realize totally how much money there really is until I worked for Life Saint News, and I was able to interact with some of these people. I remember being invited to a Legatus meeting. For those of you who maybe don't know what Legatus is, it's like a Catholic business professionals group. And usually you have very wealthy business professionals that are part of this group. So I remember being invited to a Legatus meeting in Baltimore at like the cathedral, you know, and it was incredible. But at the same time, I thought, I can't believe like we're drinking wine, we're having these lovely meals served to us.
It's like the good side of like the Catholic elite, you know.
It was.
I mean, compared to like McCarrick and his cronies and the stuff that
even in Baltimore, it's not a very good but I mean. Yeah, I mean, there was some goodness there.
Right.
And the reason I was brought was to like secure extra donors, because there was a gentleman that was like really good, very supportive of the work. He just couldn't be a major donor at the time. And I just remember being kind of awestruck because I didn't realize like the opulence.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That is, especially in these different dioceses. I mean, like, you don't see stuff like that here in our diocese. I mean, we're totally bankrupt. I mean, it's. I mean, I don't see that level of opulence as I was seeing in a place like Baltimore.
There's
You know what
not
I
the
mean?
assimilation with the political culture in the same way
Exactly,
either.
because
So
you get closer to DC and there is this sort of ubiquity in terms of politics and the church, and you have like Wilton Gregory and all these people that are they're major players, but there's also major corruption.
right.
And you get a George Newmeyer who's out there exposing it and asking the hard questions that people like us are asking ourselves,
Right.
and there's just no one there to be a mouthpiece.
And like arguably presenting pretty incontrovertible evidence that there is corruption.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean,
yeah, I
like
couldn't help but be a little bit skeptical.
I mean, the street footage that he was getting was unbelievable. So yeah, he's an incredible journalist. There were Newmeyers out at TAC that had just incredible gravel in their gut, and I remember really liking him. And I think I might have met him once. And yeah, so his untimely passing, and kind of on the complete opposite end, he's working on the street. We've got Pope Benedict, who's trying to hold things together in his pontificate. Unfortunately. I think he admitted himself with pretty mixed results. I don't know if...
Yeah, what do you say to his critics? Because he had a fair amount.
Right. Well, so I mean, a lot of people just hate the church. And so like when they call him like,
what do you say to someone who calls him like a modernist? I mean, because there are some accusations of him being a modernist.
Yeah, well, definitely he had a trajectory in his intellectual career that started off heterodox. Right. And so like if you...
Yeah, absolutely.
So like he was an advisor to, I think it was the Archbishop of Cologne at Vatican II. So he was president of Vatican II. And then afterwards he came back to teach in, I think it was in Germany. And he only, after he was a teacher in Germany and his students were complaining about the masochism of the New Testament. And how, so like this idea that sacrifice needed to be removed from the New Testament because it was self-effacing, something like that, which is like very New Age.
There is literally nothing more sanctifying than the gift of self.
Well, so anyway, so Ratzinger as professor realized that there was only one way, and of course that's orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And so...
that's interesting.
Yeah, so
because you can explain that, because I feel like a lot of people look at his earlier writings and they say, there's a lot that's suspect.
Well, he distanced himself from his earlier writings pretty. So one of the things that's interesting about Pope Benedict was that he did a lot of interviews. Like his opus is just massive. First of all, I'm not a Benedict expert, but he has thousands of books. I mean thousands of books. Only a tiny fraction has even been translated into the English language. And so his intellectual career is so massive compared to most of us that
so you're documenting that he's human. So what you're saying is he's human. Like he developed intellectually.
Right. Well, and I think that what you saw, what he did when he was the head of the CDF and then when he was Pope, was his mature thinking. And what did he care about when he was a mature thinker? Was he cared about liturgy, right? So like I brought the Spirit of the Liturgy, which is of course named after Romano Guardini, and he talked a lot about it in his pontificate and in his work, the renewal of the sacred liturgy. And a new liturgical movement, which he ultimately, I think the most concrete thing that he did to renew the liturgy was Summum Pontificorum, right? So his motu proprio, liberalizing the traditional mass. Like that was the most concrete thing he did in his pontificate to actively exercise the stronger liturgy in the church.
Did you know that he released a posthumous book today?
Yes, I've heard about that. I've heard interviews, because is this so the guy who's commenting is this the one with his...
And Darren's also teasing you for how you're pronouncing liturgy.
Oh yeah. Oh great. Okay. But I don't even...
He's from Minnesota. Yeah. What he says it doesn't count.
It's liturgy, don't you know? Whoa there.
You betcha.
Yeah. Whoa, it's the liturgy up here up on the dock by the boat.
I'm going to call you out, Darren, especially after how you did me wrong at the beginning of this show.
So the thing that's interesting about Pope Benedict is that really late in his career, like he not only embraced Orthodox positions, but tried to make a real change in the church. using what he could. And I think that we're all baffled by his retirement, when he left his post. And I mean, I want to believe him at face value, but
yeah, Nick here is saying it's kind of an expose all book.
So if it's the one that I think that, so he had a secretary, who Ganswein, who's been doing interviews, by the way. EWTN translated some of the interviews recently, and so like it's coming out that like Pope Benedict was heartbroken by the motu proprio that Pope Francis came out with against the traditional liturgy.
Traditionis Custodes,
right? Exactly.
It sounds like he's going to be releasing another clampdown.
That's what I've heard. Yeah,
the traditional liturgy.
So I hope that doesn't happen, but that's a good example of like. So there were internal conflicts. The other book that I brought that I think is worth taking a look at it. So this is Cardinal Sarah's. Am I saying it right? Sarah.
Yes, Sarah.
Yeah. So from the depths of our hearts. So this is about priestly celibacy. And this was, of course, with the Amazon Synod, something that is threatening the integrity of the church, right? The idea that priests are actually set apart for God, and that there's the argument that Pope Benedict makes in this book is that it isn't just merely functional; it's ontological.
It is,
and that
you see it in sacred scripture, being a eunuch for the kingdom of God.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Well, in Christ's own life,
in Christ too. I mean, if you're going to ignore the fact that Christ himself was celibate,
right?
Which I don't understand how people, because I've heard this argument from Protestants all the time that, well, that's not natural. It's like, well, our Lord did it.
It's supernatural.
It is supernatural.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So this is like, I think this is the last book from the depths of our hearts. I think the last book that he published in English with Cardinal Sarah. And this is a great example of like, okay, so like, what is it that he actually cares about in his ministry as Pope, and then after as Pope Emeritus? It's preserving doctrinal truths of the church and like the orthopraxis that follows from valid teaching, from faithful following of the church's teaching. And so I think that's what I would want to remember him for at this point. It's not good to speak ill of the dead. There are plenty of things that he could have done better. We didn't have any.
There are so many things that we all could do better.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm like, I defy anyone to show me someone who did more for tradition in the 20th century than Pope Benedict.
In the 20th century. And I think that's key, because I don't think it's fair necessarily to compare him to other popes, for example, that lived before this time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I look at some of the writings of Saint Pope John Paul II and think that was pretty bold, even for where he was at, like Mulieris Dignitatem.
Sure.
I mean, that was
absolutely.
for him to basically come out and say, like, yeah, I see that women are working, but that's not optimal.
Right.
And women should be at home with their children, and we should create economic systems that allow women to be home with their children, because that is for the betterment of children, that is more in accord with their nature. I mean, feminists would just be totally enraged by that. But he has been sort of rebranded as the feminist pope, which I don't understand. I mean, I remember being a quote unquote pro-life feminist and sort of pointing to Pope John Paul II and being like, look he was okay with women working and all this other stuff. And then the more I actually read his work, I thought, oh, that's like actually not at all what he was saying. He was sort of like a lesser of two evils, It was like, this is the hand that we've been dealt. So this is what we kind of have to do right now, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, both John Paul II and Benedict are examples of erudition at a level that's so far beyond ordinary Catholics, myself included, that it's very hard to brand them sort of like simply as like, oh yeah, they're for this thing.
But do you think that's because like we have social media and like mass media sort of growing?
We want to like compartmentalize these guys. So like
we want them on our team.
Yeah, I was laughing at CNN's like post-humanist like little 2-minute thing on, okay, Pope Benedict died today. He was 95. He was a conservative. And it's like,
depends on who you ask.
What do you even mean by that term? Like,
because it's meaningless. It's sort of like every other word today.
Right.
It really doesn't carry much weight because it has so many different connotations that are so splintered off from what it actually originally meant. So Do you mean it as how it's used today, or do you mean it in an actual traditional sense?
Yeah, like what is traditional about him stepping away from the pontificate, for example? Like that's like,
exactly.
I mean, it's happened one other time 600 years ago, like very weird, not something normal. Exactly, right. And so it's just clear that he's not thinking according to those paradigms at all.
Yeah, for sure.
But what he is thinking about is he's thinking about the deposit of faith and what is passed on essentially by the church in the deposit of faith. And that's where I think he's going to be remembered favorably, is trying to protect things that have been sacred and still are. Like traditional
the liturgy.
Expressions of the liturgy. Right,
I think, you know, I've shared this. I mean, we go to a quote unquote unicorn Novus Ordo. I don't even like that term, but I don't know how else to describe it. You know what I mean?
Like, I love it. Yeah,
I don't know how
we have a poverty of language around the liturgy.
We really
right now,
do.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have a poverty of language in general, right? That's kind of part of the English language, unfortunately. I think other languages, especially the Romance languages, are more artistic and more. They sort of capture things a little bit better.
Sure.
It's very
But so the example of the unicorn Novus Ordo Mass, that's the new liturgical movement that Benedict cultivated in a very strong way. That's Romano Guardini and a lot of the liturgical reformers realizing, just the effects of Vatican II are extremely destructive, and we need to reframe our liturgical theology so that we're not quite, arguably intentionally destroying
and Protestantizing.
Right, exactly.
Like people talk about Protestantizing the liturgy as if it's a good thing because it's a way to bridge the two together. And my thought is, has been the thought of Christianity since the dawn of time, is no, you call people to more.
Of course.
You call them to more. You call them to truth. You don't meet them halfway. You say, and that's not, you can accompany them and sort of draw them in, but at the end of the day, you don't accompany them and then meet them halfway. You accompany them into the fullness.
Well, it's like Father Z's mantra, lex orandi, lex credendi.
Absolutely.
Right? There's an expression of faith, which is united with the thing that Christ actually specifically revealed, and that's in the tradition of the church. And a capital T tradition. This is what has always been maintained in the fullness by the Catholic Church, and either the actions of faith align with that or they don't. And if they do, then it's right worship, and that's liturgy. And if it doesn't align with that, then that's liturgical abuse. Exactly. Like that's all there is to it. Like
it's not rocket science.
Right. Yeah. So it's very simple, really. Like, is your liturgical act aligned with the traditions of the faith in its expression or not? Like,
and this is where I think traditionalists are so misunderstood sometimes, because it is a jarring difference between the traditional form of the liturgy, the extraordinary, the so-called extraordinary form, which it is extraordinary, but it was the ordinary form.
Yeah, Tridentine Latin Mass.
Exactly. And then you come to a Novus Ordo, and they're so contrary, And I'm not saying that the Novus Ordo can't bring people into the church. You know what? I say this, I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks, the Lord uses all things for the good of those who love him, right?
Yep.
And so that's his faithfulness. That's not ours.
Right.
And there has to be a distinction there.
Of course.
Yes, God can write straight with crooked lines. Okay. We use all this euphemistic and artistic language to describe the same thing. But at the end of the day, there's something more significant, more beautiful, and more expressive and innate of human nature and our relationship to God and everything that he had sort of anointed and ordained for us insofar as how we come to relate and know him. And we should be prioritizing that. We shouldn't be pushing it aside or making it difficult to obtain. And that's where I think Summorum Pontificum was such a gift to the church at a time when the extraordinary form was being cast aside.
Right.
And now we have things like Traditionis Custodes and the kind of rumored upcoming clampdown of the traditional form.
Right.
So like
an apostolic letter or something.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm very concerned for sure.
I mean, you go to an extraordinary form
when I can.
When you
like,
can.
yeah, I think that is a problem of the church, by the way, and not only my problem. Like that's like I'm resentful of the fact that it's difficult for me to get to traditional masses. It's not something that I think is solely.
Were you raised going? I mean, so did they do a traditional?
No, so I mean, I went to St. Raphael's in Crystal, and we had excellent pious priests there. So like Father Z was there when I was a kid, and Father Altier.
And Father Altier.
Yeah, so like I remember being an altar server and thinking like, why is Father Altier taking so long at the consecration?
That's so
fun. Like I remember him being like going in slow-mo and being like, this guy really believes what he's doing.
Like a Padre Pio. I mean, it would take him 4 hours to celebrate Mass sometimes.
Right. And like
Could you imagine Catholics sitting for 4 hours?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's so great.
They would never would.
Yeah, and like my low-res 8-year-old brain is like, oh, I think something good is happening, right? Like, which is what you should be thinking as an 8-year-old at the Mass. But so I mean, like, I think that I think as Catholics, so like, I'm not the first person to say this. I don't know if it was Taylor Marshall, but we're all traditionalists now. If you care at all about the liturgy and you read Traditione Custodias, this is like clearly an affront to not only like Catholic sensibilities, but actually the orthopraxis of the church. And so we need to be thinking actively about how we can support traditional liturgy. I'm a huge supporter of that. I also think that it's true that it's not just liturgy that's under threat here. It's the whole integrity of the church. And so that's, again, like why education and family and so many other things are important. But I think that fundamentally, again, this comes back to this idea. Here's a way to look at it that I think is meaningful. The first liturgy, which is the liturgy which enriches all liturgy, is the liturgy in heaven, right? Which is the liturgy that the blessed experience, and that liturgy is the form of all worship, right? And so if we unite ourselves as much as we can in this life to the blessed in heaven by trying to be saints, then the reform that needs to happen spiritually in the church, which I think can only really be obtained through sacrifice and reparation, is going to be made possible. It's not only about an intellectual assent to traditional liturgical forms, but the reform of the heart that's at the heart of the faith, right? Conversion. And that's at the heart of tradition.
And that is the biggest miracle.
Right. Absolutely.
That God can ever affect on our lives.
That's
the thing that I keep coming back to with all the pro-life stuff too. It's like conversion being the biggest miracle that God can ever affect. And that's why at the story of the paralytic, he doesn't heal the paralytic of his paralysis because that's the miracle, but as an outward expression of that interior healing that he experienced, right? And so the biggest miracle that we can ever experience, the raising of Lazarus. Lazarus. I said Lazarus. Where's Jason over at Tradman? You're watching. It's a joke. It's an ongoing joke. He said Lazarus. But it's living in my brain now. So I blame you. Yeah, so I mean this miracle, that's the real miracle, right? And God shows us through all these other things and through our senses, right? Nick, oh shoot, I just lost your question. Nick, I'm going to find it. The traditional Thomas. Okay. So Nick, question. Pope Benedict often spoke about mutual enrichment. The new Mass got many things such as Latin smells and bells, etc. I've always wondered, what did the TLM get in terms of mutual enrichment?
Yeah, I think that he was being diplomatic. I think that he didn't mean it like it was going equally both ways. I actually think, and this is a hot take. I don't know if it's clear from
like hot takes on my channel.
Is that I think Benedict would have liked to have seen the old rite much more prominent than it was, and that he's when you read his work on the liturgy. So like one of the things that he touches on at the end of the Spirit of the Liturgy is just why Ad Orientem is so important.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, because it expresses an interior reality, right?
Right. Like well, so it's an orientation of the church to God, right? Yeah. So we know that. But what's actually the more fundamental reality is it's an affirmation that all of creation is ordered to God. So it's like what he calls cosmic liturgy, right? And like there's a way in which you create this subjectivism when the priest becomes the like, okay, this is my cooking show. This is our whiskey tasting podcast, right? Oh, right? Most definitely, yeah.
You know, and that's you lived out in California for some time, and you kind of. We touched on it before we started recording, but I mean,
so definitely, right, there. And so
liturgical abuse, there's that's the nicest way we can put it,
right? So I mean, I think that in terms of sort of like the gravitational effect of the new liturgical movement would have been actually the rise of the prominence of the traditional liturgy, and then also I think the I mean, relatively speaking, what did we see during Benedict's pontificate? We saw a much greater interest in creating sacred Novus Ordos. Like all the seminarians, that's what they're all about is, okay, we can try Latin, we can try, ad orientem, we can do chant again, Gregorian chant's a critical feature of good liturgy.
That is beautiful music.
Right, exactly.
It strikes at the chord of the human soul.
Right, and it goes back to, the Jewish sacrificial chants. And so it's like really like the things that Christ himself would have sung. And so there's so many ways in which I think that the Novus Ordo would have really been deeply enriched by the traditional liturgy had we've been able to continue in what Benedict was hoping for, which is the new liturgical movement. As far as what the traditional mass was getting, I mean, it was getting attention. That's good. I think that there's a lot of merit to that, and we certainly have some traditional mass societies that were created at post-Vatican II that are doing a lot of good, that I as far as creating a greater awareness of the traditional liturgy, but it's not balanced. I mean, I'll give you that if that's the point of the question.
And Samantha has a good point here that she thinks having the English Latin side by side is kind of helpful for people who have, just help them understand more that's going on in the liturgy, because catechesis has been so bad. Even like the Second Vatican Council wasn't like this sudden thing that happened.
Nobody knew Latin in the 19th century. Like you were erudite if you had studied Latin enough to understand what's going on.
And that's the thing I think sometimes people forget is that it didn't happen in a vacuum, right? Like there had to be things leading up and preceding that sort of cultivated the groundwork for that to happen. So for you, as we should probably close this out. We've been going on almost 2.5 hours. I cannot believe some of you guys have stayed with us that long, but
everybody.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much. Yes, Jason, you are kind of a social influencer now. I mean, I'm now saying Lazarus. For reason. I can't even believe that I said that. Lazarus. He's gonna Lazarus, forgive me. Pray for me. But what would you say to anyone who's listening? I suppose we'll give you like a 1 more minute to sort of ask any last minute questions. But what are some of the things that you would like to impart on anyone who's still listening about, I don't know, integration of the human person, and maybe where they can learn more about, I don't know. I mean, you brought some of these books, but like, what's the next step for people that you think learning more about integration or even bourbon tasting? What's your favorite kind of bourbon? I want to know that and human integration.
Many questions. Well, the best.
I'm really good at many questions.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah. So, best bourbon I ever had was Pappy Van Winkle, and it was some old one, like 22-year Pappy Van Winkle. And I actually had that out at Clear Creek Monastery, so the great Benedictine monastery in Oklahoma, traditionalist monastery.
What made it so great?
Probably how the company was a big part of it, because I was with a bunch of other really strong Catholics, but it was also just really complex and delicious, and you can't find it anymore. So it's a very good whiskey.
Oh, of course. So sorry, guys, you'll never be able to enjoy
it. If you find Pappy 22, bring it to me. But words of wisdom, I don't know. I mean, I would say, festivity is a way of being in tune with the world, and that by recognizing the world for its goodness, we are drawn to the creator of that goodness. Nietzsche has this great quote that in order to affirm anything, you have to affirm everything. And so that's what it means to be Catholic, that you have to affirm everything, to say yes to everything. That sort of resonates with my Carmelite spirituality.
Good. You know what I mean? Like
everything that is good. right? Insofar that things are lacking, they're not even existing.
Oh, that's an interesting. Yeah, okay.
Like that's like the definition of that's Augustine's big problem. You know, he's a
Right.
Manichaean. He thought that there was an evil substance. There's no such thing. It's just a privation of good things that we
That's
fail in.
interesting. Right, the deprivation and the wholeness, lacking in wholeness.
Exactly, right, in integrity, right?
Yes,
and
integrity. Yeah.
So I mean, to be truly whole is a
good.
grace, and good. And so I think that you know, committing ourselves, especially as men, to the discipline of a life of prayer and asceticism and fraternity, and recognizing that God is calling us each uniquely to himself in a life of holiness. That's what life is all about.
Thank you so much. This is Andrew Lang, headmaster of Holy Spirit Academy in Monticello, if you're watching, but also has the channel 555 Gear if you want to check out his YouTube channel where he once upon a time used to review gear. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Talking about all this stuff. This was awesome. And hopefully you learned a little bit about bourbon on the way, but even more so learning about our faith and our Lord. I'll see you guys later. God bless.